That night, Evelyn registered a private Weibo account. After it was verified, she made her first post. It wrote, "Hi, I'm Evelyn Huo. I want to clarify the issues between me and Calvert G. Perhaps it's the lack of things we have in common that makes us unsuitable to be lovers. With that, I'm putting an end to our relationship, and from now on we are just friends. I appreciate all your love and support. Thank you so much. However, I ask that you don't mention this again. Let bygones be bygones. This is the last time I'm going to bring this up. Thank you for understanding." Evelyn's fans were nothing but supportive. Since she said that she didn't want to talk about it anymore, no one brought it up again. Calvert had threatened Evelyn that he would expose her relationship with Sheffield, but after all that Carlos had done to the G group, Langston had no choice but to force his son to give up. The incident went away quietly. When the Lunar March came, Evelyn set off to D-City. She already knew where Sheffield was. He was offering medical help in a small village in D-City, and she was going to take him back. Tayson had gotten married in his hometown, so Carlos found her a new bodyguard whose name was Felix Zhang. Felix Zhang drove Evelyn to D-City, followed by 3 cars full of bodyguards. But soon after they had set off, Evelyn suddenly felt uncomfortable. First, she started to feel nauseous. She assumed it was just car sickness from reading while the car was moving. She only lasted for about half an hour until she had to ask Felix Zhang to pull over at a gas station along the expressway. Getting out of the car, she sped to the bathroom. When she went to the toilet, she was surprised to find that there was a little blood in her underwear. As she pondered over this, she realized that it had been almost 2 months since her last period. She'd already experienced an ectopic pregnancy, so she instantly felt uneasy. She didn't know if the blood was from her period or another pregnancy. Weakly making her way to the car, she told Felix Zhang, "Please drive me to the nearest hospital you can find." Felix Zhang asked in concern, "Are you not feeling well, Miss Huo?" "Aha. Got it." Wasting no more time, he stay at home and take care of herself. "But what about Sheffield?" Debbie couldn't help but notice Evelyn's hesitance in talking to Sheffield, and she couldn't understand why. "I don't care about him. It's his decision whether he comes back or not. What I'm focused on right now is fulfilling my duty as a grandfather to this baby." Carlos preferred that Evelyn give birth to a girl actually. "Are you telling me that you're done meddling with Evelyn and Sheffield's relationship?" Debbie probed. Carlos nodded as he took out of his phone. Then something occurred to him. "Wait a minute. Why should I?" "It depends." "Depends on what?" "On whether or not you can accept Sheffield. He signed an unfair contract with our company just to prove to Evelyn how sorry he was. He's been nothing but good to her. Why won't you leave them alone?" Debbie was furious. She didn't know how Matthew had convinced Sheffield to sign the contract, because it was completely unfair. It was Sheffield who had developed that drug, and rightfully, he should be the one who would profit the most. However, after signing the contract, most of the profits would now belong to ZL Group. Even though Carlos knew what Sheffield had done, he still said stubbornly, "Do you think any amount of money could make up what he did to Evelyn? All the harm he caused her? Do you think I need that money?" Debbie put on a fake smile and waved at Carlos. "Fine. Forget about what I said. You can do whatever you like. It's none of my business." Carlos called Dixon and quickly made some arrangements. After getting everything in order, he hung up the phone and stared at Evelyn's bedroom door, deep in thought. After dinner, Evelyn finally plucked up some courage to call Sheffield. However, to her disappointment, his phone was switched off. "Sorry, the subscriber you have dialed is currently unavailable." Evelyn tried calling him a few more times after that, but to no avail. In the end, she gave up. Ever since Evelyn was pregnant, she stopped going to the company. Carlos gave no explanation as to why she suddenly decided to quit her job. As such, people's imaginations ran wild, creating baseless narratives, one stranger than the other. Some guessed that Evelyn was so devastated by what Calvert did that she decided to go on a soul-healing vacation. As time went by, Evelyn's whereabouts became a mystery. Despite all the media reporters' best efforts, No one could tell where she was. 2 years later in Leafside Village, D-City. The entire village was home to a bustling population set against the backdrop of the ruins of dilapidated houses. A gray-colored, 7-seater minivan slowly stopped opposite a small clinic at the entrance of the village. Without rolling down the window, the woman in the car stared at the shabby clinic. Sitting in the back seat of the minivan, she squinted her eyes to get a closer look and found a doctor examining a crying child with his stethoscope. The doctor's white uniform looked relatively new. Neither his clothing nor his temperament fit in well with this run-down village. Having noticed what was wrong with the child, the doctor began to write down the prescription on paper. Give him Western medicine first, then switch back to Chinese medicine after he's better. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Tang. The plainly dressed woman, who was holding the child in her arms, looked at him with gratitude. He was the most skilled and handsome doctor in all the nearby villages. He could easily draw a long queue of patients from here, all the way to the opposite side of the road. It was already past noon, and this child was his last patient for the morning. Any outsider would simply assume that he didn't have many patients, but the truth was that Sheffield had a lot of patients on his waiting list this afternoon. A woman in a nurse's uniform came out of the inner chamber. Come to you? She asked again. Because she misses me. This time he wore a hearty smile on his face. What? Is she one of your admirers? There were many women who wanted to be with Sheffield. Even the widows in the village wanted to get close to him. One of my admirers? Sheffield didn't deny it. Yes, he replied with a smirk. Well, do you like her? She asked, holding her breath in expectation. As Sheffield took out his phone, he replied, No, I don't. His answer certainly relieved the girl's worries. Fortunately, she still had a chance to be with him. However, what Sheffield didn't tell the nurse was that he didn't want Evelyn to be just his friend. Never. He denied liking Evelyn because the word like wasn't strong enough to describe his feelings for her. Evelyn was the only woman he had ever loved so dearly. Soon after, Sheffield sent Joshua a message. Hey dude, do you miss me? The man responded almost immediately. Yes, I do. I miss you so much that I'm about to cry. Well, it's time for me to come back, replied Sheffield with a bigger smile. It had been 2 years and it was time to settle accounts with some people. In the Huo family manor, Y City, Evelyn got out of the minivan and walked into the villa in her high heels. In the living room, Carlos was holding a baby girl in his arms. Gwen, I'll put you to bed when you are full, he coaxed her. The baby was Gwyneth, Sheffield and Evelyn's daughter. Debbie heard the noise of Evelyn's high heels and stuck her head out of the kitchen. Evelyn, you are back. How is it going? Debbie put the rest of the water back in the fridge. The water was just for the baby after all. The road to the Leafside village was bad, and it was an exhausting trip. Evelyn rubbed her temples and answered, Not good. He's not planning on coming back. I guess I'll just have to take care of Gwyneth by myself from now on. When Evelyn looked at her daughter who was drinking her milk, she smiled for the first time in days. She squatted down so she was looking into Gwyneth's eyes. Gwyn, did you miss me? Gwyneth merely stared back at her, her face blank. Evelyn then took Gwyneth from Carlos' arms. She'd missed her daughter so much. At that moment, Debbie was just walking out of the kitchen. She stopped in front of Evelyn and asked, Didn't you tell him about Gwyneth? His daughter. Evelyn shook her head. Sheffield was so cold and indifferent to her, so it was not like she had the chance to tell him. Carlos rolled his eyes. Why should Evelyn tell him? Let him go through what I went through. Carlos didn't see Evelyn until she was 3 years old. Gwyneth was 1 year old now. There was 2 years to go before she was 3. He liked the idea of Sheffield not knowing about his own daughter until she turned 3. Debbie cast an angry glance at her husband. This is different. Back then I thought you were dead. How could I have told you about Evelyn? But Sheffield is in D-City, perfectly fine and alive. I don't see why Evelyn shouldn't tell him the truth. Evelyn lowered her head to kiss Gwyneth's forehead and said in a soft voice, Dad, Mom, that's it. We can take care of Gwen together. This left Carlos and Debbie speechless. They used to have way more servants in the mansion. However, Carlos had fired most of those servants due to the incident that happened a few months ago. Since then, Debbie and Carlos had been taking care of Gwyneth themselves. When Gwyneth finished her bottle, Debbie took it from her and went to the kitchen to wash and sterilize it. When she came back to the living room, Evelyn had put Gwyneth on the floor, watching her playing with her toys. Debbie wiped her hands with a tissue and threw it afterward. "We're running out of water for Gwen's formula. Are you going to send some? Were you interested in attending the Theo group's anniversary, the day after tomorrow?" While she packed her stuff, Evelyn shook her head and answered, "No." Carlos nodded. After a while he added, "Matthew called and said he wanted you to go to the party. I guess he was planning something. Anyway, if you don't want to go, I can ask someone else to attend." Matthew wanted her there? Evelyn thought for a while. Matthew isn't really the type to do something without a reason. There must be something going on if he specifically asked for me to attend. Is it because he wants me to meet the new CEO of Theo Group? "Dad, I can go." Carlos was just about to text Matthew when he heard this. In response, he deleted his message and nodded. "Okay. You don't have to worry about Gwen. Your mother and I will take care of her. Just enjoy yourself." "Okay. Thank you, Dad." At the venue of Theo Group's 40th anniversary, the venue was exquisitely decorated and the air smelled of flowers. The food and drinks they served the guests were luxurious. Snacks, fruits, wine, champagne, liquor, you name it. It didn't have to be said, but it was quite obvious that Peterson Tang was going all out with this party. Since he was going to announce the new CEO of Theo Group, celebrities and distinguished guests alike filled the banquet hall. That evening, Evelyn donned a wine-red fishtail gown that bared her back. As much as she tried to keep a low profile, she still attracted a lot of attention. The newcomers in Y City had only heard of Evelyn's name and had never seen her before. When they saw her, they marveled at her beauty. Some young men even wanted to approach her. However, they were blocked by her bodyguard, Felix. It had been half an hour since Evelyn had entered the venue. She chatted with the host for a while before staying at a table near the window, so she could look out and enjoy the view. Her mind went from work to Gwen and so many other things. "Hey, Evelyn." She heard a familiar male voice. She turned around only to find Joshua standing a few meters away as he was blocked by Felix. He wore a white suit and was holding a glass of champagne in his hand. Evelyn nodded at Felix, who then stepped aside. Joshua walked up to her and sat down in front of her. "Evelyn, you have such a diligent bodyguard." Evelyn felt quite helpless as Felix was so protective. The Huo family had a lot of enemies who were always after them. It was better to be safe than sorry. "My father's just worried about me," she said apologetically. Joshua nodded with an understanding smile. "I understand. By the way, I haven't seen you much in the last 2 years. What have you been busy with?" he asked. Evelyn had kept such a low profile these past 2 years that even Joshua had barely seen her. In fact, in the previous year, he hadn't seen her at all. He'd already asked Terilyn about it, but she always responded with the same thing. "I can't say anything. My father won't let me." Evelyn smiled. Nothing much. Although she was smiling, Joshua could tell that she didn't want to talk about this. He immediately changed the topic and looked at her mysteriously. "Do you know who's going to take over the Theo Group?" Evelyn shook her head honestly. She had heard a lot of rumors before. When she saw Joshua's mysterious smile, she asked with astonishment, "Are you suggesting that Mr. Tang's 1-year-old son is going to take over the group?" It was rumored that Peterson was going to hand over the position to his youngest son, but everyone knew that he was just a baby. Peterson had held a grand party last year for his son's 1-month celebration. Gwen was about the same age. Ha ha ha, that's Smen though. They looked like CEOs of other companies. Just as she was hesitating whether to leave or not, Peterson caught sight of her. "Miss Huo, you came. I was looking for you." Sheffield had been saying that he wanted to meet the representative of ZL Group. It was not until Peterson had his men look around that he knew that Evelyn had gone to the ladies' room. Peterson turned around and found that Sheffield, who had been standing beside him, had disappeared. Evelyn stood up and gave him a broad smile. She raised her glass and said, "Mr. Tang, congratulations." She had met Peterson before. ZL Group and Theo Group were both large companies, so it wasn't entirely impossible for them to run into each other every now and then. Peterson was actually Gwen's grandfather. This thought made Evelyn have mixed feelings. She had to look Peterson up and down again. Today he was wearing a dark blue suit and a tie of the same color. His short hair was slightly gray. His face was a little wrinkled, and whenever he wasn't smiling, he always looked serious. Sheffield didn't look like his father very much on the surface. But if one looked closely, they did have some slight resemblances. Perhaps Sheffield looked more like his mother than he did his father. "Thank you, Miss Hua. I hope you're having a wonderful night." Peterson was courteous to Evelyn. After all, she was Carlos' daughter. Right at this moment, a man's voice interrupted them. "Uncle Peterson." Evelyn turned to look at the source of the voice. It was none other than Joshua, and the man standing right beside him was Sheffield, hands in his pockets. Peterson waved at them and said, "Sheffield, Joshua, get over here. I'd like you to meet Miss Hua." The two young men just stood there. "You sure that he doesn't know about you and Evelyn?" Joshua asked his buddy in a low voice. "Yeah, he knows," replied Sheffield, staring at Evelyn. "He knows everything about me. He's just pretending not to. I've been around Evelyn a lot. There's no way he couldn't know," he thought to himself. "Okay, so we just roll with it." "That's what I figured," Joshua thought. There were a lot of people on Uncle Peterson's payroll, and some of them were sent to spy on Sheffield. And it's not like Evelyn and Sheffield were trying to hide their relationship. "Yeah, Uncle Peterson knows all about it." Sheffield tilted his head. "Give me your glass." "What?" Joshua was about to head over to greet Peterson when he heard Sheffield's sudden request. He was taken aback. "Your glass of red wine. Give it to me," he repeated. Joshua took a glance at the contents of his glass. He'd already drunk some of it. "No way, dude. Flag down a waiter." "What? You haven't become a complete lush on me, have you?" Not in the mood to trade quips with his friend, Sheffield stopped a passing waiter and grabbed a glass of red wine from the tray. Then he started walking toward Peterson and Evelyn. Joshua positioned himself in front of Peterson. This way, Sheffield had no choice but to confront Evelyn. Joshua wanted to see how the two were going to react. Sheffield didn't let Joshua down. He took advantage of the situation and was near Evelyn. When he saw this, Joshua thought his friend was still not close enough to Evelyn, so he crowded Sheffield. Sheffield, his space invaded, instinctively moved closer to the love of his life. The two buddies exchanged knowing looks. They gave each other a thumbs up in their hearts. Before Peterson could introduce everyone, a young woman in a pink cheongsam came over, taking his arm intimately. "There you are. I've been looking for you forever." The woman was in her this. "When did I trip him? If he tripped over me, I should have felt it, right?" Peterson gazed at Evelyn and then back to his son, who was wearing only a white shirt, and then at the stunned Joshua. He knew his son well. Instantly, he understood what Sheffield was doing. "My son is pretty possessive when it comes to Evelyn," he mused. Evelyn was angry and helpless. She needed time to calm down. Handing her glass of wine to Felix, she politely bid goodbye to Peterson and his wife. "Mr. and Mrs. Tang, I'm leaving now. Goodbye." "I'm sorry, Miss Hua. I'll have my son pay to replace your dress when he gets a chance," Peterson said to Evelyn. "Thank you, Mr. Tang, but that's not necessary." She took off the suit jacket and handed it to Felix. "Give this back to Mr. Tang," she said. "Mr. Tang, your jacket." Felix handed the jacket back to Sheffield at once. Taking his jacket and ignoring whether the woman was angry or not, Sheffield said nonchalantly, "All right, bye." Evelyn left with Felix without responding. There were only 4 people left. Peterson decided to lecture his son, who was with a successful look on his face. "Sheffield, you were a little too obvious. You're a public figure now. We can't risk big things for the sake of small ones." Risk big things for the sake of small ones? Looking at the empty glass in his hand, Sheffield replied nonchalantly, I think you and I have very different ideas of what a big thing is. And? Is a woman more important than the Theo group? Peterson asked in reply. This was not what he wanted to hear. Sheffield shifted his eyes from the glass in his hand to Peterson. Then why should I come back? He spoke in a cold tone, as if he were not talking to his biological father. Actually, Peterson had tried to get Sheffield to take over the company a few years back, but Sheffield rebuffed him each time. After Sheffield made inroads in drug research and development, Peterson had given up on that idea. Now that he had something he was interested in, why should he leave that behind? But Sheffield had given all of that up. He had gone to the countryside to offer some much-needed medical support. That was when Peterson started to think that maybe he could lure the young man back to the company. Peterson was expecting an uphill battle. After all, he had been turned down by Sheffield several times. But the young doctor contacted him first. He agreed to come back and take over the company. Peterson was so excited that he and his assistant even went to the D-City to pick Sheffield up. Not giving anyone a chance to raise objections, he let Sheffield move into the position immediately. Peterson had also racked his brains to figure out what could have made Sheffield change his mind, and when he realized what it might be, his eyes widened in shock. So he came back because of her? Is she really that attractive to Sheffield? He thought to himself in disbelief. Knowing that he had figured it out, Sheffield turned around and left. Joshua ran after Sheffield. When they were out of earshot, Joshua said angrily, What did you think you were doing anyway? What? I don't understand. Sheffield didn't like parties much. When Evelyn left, he got bored and frustrated. So he decided to leave. Was Joshua talking about that? Why did you pour red wine on Evelyn? And you even blamed it on me. Some friend you are. Her back was bare. People were starting to stare. The way those men looked at her made him very uncomfortable. When he ruined her evening dress last time, he warned her not to wear such a revealing dress again. Apparently, she hadn't learned her lesson. Well, he was going to teach her. Joshua looked at the calm man in astonishment and asked, What? You caused a scene over that? Yeah. So, Sheffield was getting bored with the conversation. Joshua rolled his eyes at. Drugged one night by her ex-boyfriend, a mysterious man took advantage of her in an ecstatic night filled with sex. To take her revenge, she married the man and used him. As long as I'm alive, I'm still his legal wife, while all of you are just his mistresses. She remained adamant even when he was involved in scandals with other women. Eventually she stormed off after she learned that he had betrayed her again. But life brought her back to him a few years later, to his astonishment. Problem with him, I can't do anything about it. I'll just live the rest of my life taking care of Gwen. But if you keep out of this and trust me for once, I'll do my best to get Sheffield back, she thought. Carlos felt a little embarrassed. To cover up his embarrassment, he let out a cold hum and said, That's all you can do. Are you going to give up if I stop you? Do you really love him? Evelyn sighed and held his arm. Dad, please stay out of this. I can do this myself, okay? Okay, but don't tell him about Gwen first. Let him feel the way I did. Evelyn was flabbergasted. Dad, you want to let Mom know about this? About what? Debbie had just washed Gwen's clothes and was about to check on the baby. When she opened the door, she heard father and daughter talking. Carlos winked at his daughter and said, Nothing, honey. Carlos' reaction amused Evelyn. Regardless of his petty action, she said to Debbie, Dad didn't want me to tell Sheffield about Gwen. He wanted him to feel the way he did. Carlos' face soured at Evelyn's words. Evelyn Huo, you little traitor, he reprimanded. Gwen is the only one who listens to me, he thought bitterly. Debbie came over to Carlos and punched his shoulder as hard as she could. Look, you got what you wanted. Everything is fine now. Evelyn and Calvert got engaged and we've got the money. If you butt into their lives again, I'll run off and leave you. What wasn't fine initially was Evelyn's ectopic pregnancy. And the money Debbie was referring to was the profit from Sheffield's research into different drug therapies. She is going to run away from me again? No way. Carlos let go of Evelyn and pulled Debbie into his arms. Hey, don't ever say that again. It's not funny at all. Aren't you ashamed of saying ridiculous things like that in front of your daughter? Why would I feel ashamed? Eve will not laugh at me. Debbie pushed him away, pouting her lips and acting all mad. Evelyn covered her eyes with the palm of her hand, stifling the urge to laugh, and shook her head at the older couple arguing like children. Suddenly, a brisk voice graced them from the stairway. Dad, Mom, please spare us from your lover's quarrel. Eve and I are still single, so please consider our feelings and stop making us feel envious. Okay? Terilyn had just returned from outside, blasting Billie Eilish's Bad Guy through her headphones. Carlos' face darkened at the sight of his younger daughter. Why are you so late? Did you go out to dinner with Joshua again? Terilyn muttered incoherently, looking up at the ceiling to avert her father's eyes. How did you know that? You are so mean to Joshua that he's afraid to come and say hello to you. Carlos furrowed his eyebrows. After all, how could he forgive Joshua for turning down his offer to get engaged to Evelyn? Joshua is not man enough to show his face to me again. After what he did, it would do him good to stay out of my sight. He spat angrily. Sighing with exasperation, Terilyn said, My dear father, can't you just be the better man and forgive him? No. I may be a reasonable person, but I am not very forgiving. If he had agreed to get engaged to Evelyn, she wouldn't have gotten engaged to Calvert. And now Gwen wouldn't have to live a life without a father by her side. The three women were all on the brink of a meltdown. Debbie retorted, Have you ever thought about your own actions? If you hadn't intervened in their business and forced Evelyn to get engaged to Calvert, Gwen's real father would have been the one to coax her to sleep now, not her grandpa. That comment caused dead silence because Debbie had hit the nail on the head. Carlos' menacing face immediately softened, but he still refused to give in. I have no regrets for what I have done. If I had done nothing, Gwen would be living with Sheffield at the Tang family mansion, and I would have no choice but to miss her every day. Besides, I don't want Gwen to call a woman in her early 30s grandma. Carlos would rather keep his granddaughter away from a social climber like Leah. Debbie and her daw. Drugged one night by her ex-boyfriend, a mysterious man took advantage of her in an ecstatic night filled with sex. To take her revenge, she married the man and used him. As long as I'm alive, I'm still his legal wife, while all of you are just his mistresses. She remained adamant even when he was involved in scandals with other women. Eventually she stormed off after she learned that he had betrayed her again. But life brought her back to him a few years later, to his astonishment. Let's talk a little longer, okay? What do you want to talk about? She asked. Ask the cuties, Mommy, if I can make the picture you took just now my new profile photo, he asked. The baby girl was so adorable. Her chubby little face and her long eyelashes. Go ahead. I'm giving you permission on behalf of her mother. Besides, it was just Gwen's profile. No one would know who she really was. After Joshua had changed his profile picture to Gwen's photo, Terilyn said, You also think she's cute, don't you? She was wondering if she should take another picture of Gwen to make it her profile picture as well. Yes, I think I am in love. Please bring her out with you so that we can hang out sometimes. I will have to discuss that with her mother first. That would prove to be quite difficult, as even if Evelyn would have no objection, Carlos would strongly oppose to that suggestion. After all, he would never take any chances with Gwen's safety after what had happened to her before. When Evelyn came out of the bathroom in a bathrobe, she saw Terilyn playing with her phone on her bed. Is there some kind of treasure inside your phone? Your face is always glued to that thing whenever I see you. Terilyn replied, Eve, I just posted a photo of Gwen's sleeping face in moments, and someone immediately made it his profile picture. What a jerk, huh? Gwen's picture. Evelyn's eyes shot up in bewilderment. Yes, but don't worry, it was just her profile. Only those who are very familiar with Gwen would be able to recognize her. The Huo family was so protective of Gwen that even Terilyn and Evelyn couldn't compare to her when both of them were young. Well, are you going back to your bedroom, or do you want to sleep here? Evelyn asked. Holding Gwyn in her arms, Terilyn said in a pettishly charming manner, Eve, I want to sleep with Gwyn tonight. Terilyn couldn't bear to be apart from such an adorable baby. Evelyn rolled her eyes at her sister and said, Fine then, but first go and take a shower. Yes, ma'am. Terilyn got off the bed and saluted Evelyn mockingly before scampering off to the bathroom. As Evelyn pensively stared at her daughter's sleeping face, she remembered something. Not long after she gave birth to Gwyn, she found it difficult to share the same bed with her daughter. Oftentimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, feeling claustrophobic in her own bed. This one time, Evelyn turned over and the little foot that was resting on her waist fell onto the bed. Her eyes shot up immediately and she saw a baby girl sleeping behind her. Gripped with fear, she sat bolt upright in bed. Staring at the little girl with wide-eyed confusion, Evelyn sat there motionlessly for a few seconds. Then after a while, she came to her senses and felt relieved. Oh, it is Gwyn, my daughter. As time passed, Evelyn eventually got used to sleeping with the little girl in the same bed. Sometimes Debbie would take Gwyn to sleep in her bedroom, or Gwyn would sleep in the baby's room alone. Evelyn wasn't used to sleeping alone. Getting used to something like that was indeed a truly horrible feeling. Meanwhile, Sheffield had resigned from the Y-City First General Hospital almost a year ago. Ever since he came back, all he did was work in the Theo group to keep himself busy. As a son of Peterson Tang, his charming good looks and brilliance made him the focus of the press. Most of the unwed ladies of Y-City wanted to marry and settle down with him. Just the other day, all the media outlets published an article about Sheffield's intimate relationship with the daughter of the King of Gamblers. Reports said that he had deliberately lost a big sum of money just to make the beautiful woman smile. More recently, there were rumors going around that Sheffield was almost impeached by the senior board members of the Theo Group. Today, the newspapers published a shocking expose on Sheffield and his best friend Joshua, the youngest son of former Mayor Darius Fan. There were photos of them both entering a nightclub and neither was seen or drugged one night by her ex-boyfriend. A mysterious man took advantage of her in an ecstatic night filled with sex. To take her revenge, she married the man and used him. As long as I'm alive, I'm still his legal wife, while all of you are just his mistresses. She remained adamant even when he was involved in scandals with other women. Eventually she stormed off after she learned that he had betrayed her again. But life brought her back to him a few years later, to his astonishment. Amilais were allowed to have fun, why couldn't he, a single man, enjoy his life too? How dare you? The reason behind Carlos' anger felt confusing and unreasonable to Sheffield. Why would Sheffield shy away from the truth? Besides, he and Evelyn weren't even together now. Much to everyone's surprise, Carlos raised his fist and darted towards Sheffield. Sheffield, however, dodged the man's fist as quickly as he could. Most of the people hanging around Sheffield were well aware of who Carlos Huo was, and as such, the moment they saw how angry he was, they immediately ran back to their private room. Only Joshua, who was leaning against the door, thought about how to separate the two men who were fighting each other. Carlos threw a second punch, but Sheffield was able to dodge it again. Fuming with rage, Carlos glared at Sheffield with bloodshot eyes and screamed, "How dare you try to dodge me? I don't want to get hit by someone I can't hit back. You are not my father. But I promise not to dodge your punch if you agree to become my father-in-law. Keep dreaming, you worthless imbecile." Carlos hardly ever cursed, but today he was too furious to care about his manners. "Don't mind if I do," Sheffield said. "One way or the other, I'm going to make Evelyn my wife and you my father-in-law," he mused. Wesley and Damon looked at Carlos, mouth agape. Wesley asked Damon, "I see that a lot's been going on in Y-City in my absence. Care to fill me in?" "My friend, I am just as clueless as you are." In fact, even Damon didn't know what this young man had done to infuriate Carlos so much. The manager of the nightclub heard that someone was making trouble in the club. He came along with a group of men, ready to drive whoever was making trouble away. When he saw that it was Carlos who had started the fight along with Sheffield, he became so frightened that he sent his men away. After all, Carlos and Sheffield were practically kings in Y City. The manager couldn't afford to offend the likes of them. Carlos kept trying to land a punch on Sheffield, but the young man kept dodging, only angering Carlos even more. Joshua could sense that something bad was going to happen. He had his relationship with Terilyn to consider. He just couldn't risk Carlos' wrath. Taking a deep breath, he ran toward Sheffield and wrapped his arms around his waist to try to get him to back off. Sheffield, this isn't worth it. Just let him land a punch. It's no big deal. Sheffield tried to struggle himself free but failed. No. I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I let him beat me up? I already let that happen before, and I was with Evelyn back then. I let it happen because he's her father, but Evelyn and I aren't even together anymore. So why should I allow him to do this? Carlos gasped for air and roared. Idiot! You think you're some big shot now, don't you? Do you think that just because you're the CEO of Theo Group, I wouldn't dare to hurt you? No, I don't. I always knew that you never liked me. And you have no respect for the Theo Group. Sheffield wanted to take one step forward, but with Joshua holding his waist, he couldn't. Uncle Carlos, come on. Show me what you've got. I'm not afraid of you. Huh? You've got some balls to challenge me. I'll beat the crap out of you today. Carlos charged toward Sheffield without a care for what other people might say. However, both Wesley and Damon stopped him from moving farther. Wesley tapped his shoulder and reminded him, Bro, you have a reputation to protect. After all, he was the president of a multinational group. What he didn't know was that Sheffield was the CEO of a multinational group too. Wesley was only involved in military affairs. He never cared about business, so he didn't know who Sheffield was. Joshua reminded Sheffield in a low voice. Dude, that's enough. Do you really want? Leap. He liked that GYWN was so close to him, her grandfather. The little girl could call Grandpa already, but she still couldn't call Dad. That made Carlos happier than when he threw a punch in Sheffield's face. The smile on Carlos' face made the hairs on Sheffield's arms stand. Before Sheffield and Joshua could figure out what Carlos was smiling about, he left along with Damon and Wesley. In the parking lot of the nightclub, Wesley was confused. Carlos, what's wrong with you? I haven't seen you act so impulsively before. What is it with you and that kid? Carlos didn't know how to explain what had happened 2 years ago. He's pursuing Evelyn, he explained grumpily. Wesley nodded. And? Are they dating?
Carlos replied honestly, No.
Evelyn wanted to be with him, but I didn't allow her. You're in the wrong here, man. As long as they're happy, then you should just stay out of it. Damon echoed Wesley. Wesley's right. Since he's not with Evelyn, he didn't do anything wrong. It's perfectly normal for him to flirt with whomever he wants. He's single after all. Carlos suddenly stopped. Damon and Wesley turned around and looked at him in confusion. After a while, Carlos said, He's Gwen's father. Gwen's father. Damon and Wesley were shocked. Not many people knew about Gwen, but Carlos' friends did. Wesley walked up to him and put his arm around his shoulder. Let's go. Let's go back. What for? Carlos didn't move. I'll help you give him a beating. Damon put his arm around Carlos' other shoulder and said, Count me in. We'll let him have a taste of the strength that's behind Gwen. A team of badass men that can beat him to death. He'd better behave himself. Wesley's lips curled into a sneer. We're not the only men in the team. Remember, I have an army. I alone can call in thousands of men to kick his ass if he does anything wrong by Gwen. Damon nodded. Damn right. Gwen is like a granddaughter to you. That's the least you could do to protect her. Carlos finally smiled. Let's get out of here. I don't have time for him now. I need to go home to Gwen. Okay, let's go. The three men got into their cars and left the parking lot. As he leaned against the wall, Sheffield thought about Carlos' creepy smile. He had no idea that he had just escaped a beating from an army. He and Joshua were left alone in the corridor. The deafening music from the booths filled the air. Both of them stayed silent for a while, and then an ominous presentiment came over Sheffield. Old fan, I have a bad feeling about this. Could you please stop calling me that? It sounded like Sheffield was calling him an old fan. Despite the fact that his surname was indeed Fan, Joshua didn't like being addressed that way. Carlos has never smiled at me. Ever. But he just did, and there was something weird about that smile. It was creepy as hell. He's probably cooking up something to mess with me, Sheffield said, ignoring Joshua's protest. He stared at the path through which Carlos had left, deep in thought. Joshua disagreed. You're just overthinking. Maybe he was in a good mood because of Aunt Debbie's call. Besides, even if he really is trying to get you into trouble, I don't think you have much to worry about. You're smart and strong. A survivor who always bounces back. Well, Sheffield mused. You do have a point. But the ominous feeling did not leave him. Carlos' smile meant something. He believed there was a hidden meaning behind it. It was like the old man knew that something was about to go down, and he was secretly glad that Sheffield had no idea what was going on. He felt like Carlos was enjoying as he, knowing nothing, walked into a trap. He was laughing at his helpless situation. The thought made Sheffield restless. Why didn't you explain to him that you were only flirting with the woman because you had lost a bet? What if he tells Evelyn? Head voice. What happened, Dad? Why did you two fight? There was a media report claiming that he was in some nightclub and hadn't come out in 2 hours. I went to see what he was doing there. And he was flirting with some woman. Carlos fumed. He kept his voice down, considering that his dear granddaughter had just fallen asleep. Sheffield was flirting with another woman? Evelyn didn't respond. She adjusted Gwen's position in her arms and sat on the edge of the bed. Debbie came back with a kit. She made Carlos sit on the couch and grumbled. Could you at least consider Evelyn's feelings when you speak? With a snort, he said. I only want her to know what that guy has been doing so that she can forget that jerk. Forget him? And then what? Debbie gently pressed on his wound, warning him to watch his mouth. Carlos, however, didn't feel the pain at all. It was just a minor wound after all. Nothing he couldn't handle. I'll introduce Evelyn to a better man, he declared. Debbie and Evelyn sighed at the same time and said in unison, So you're trying to meddle again? Debbie disinfected the wound for him, and then took a Band-Aid to put on his wound. Do you have too much free time on your hands? Or do you think Evelyn doesn't have enough on her plate already? Carlos stared at the Band-Aid in his wife's hand. If you get rid of that Band-Aid, I won't bother introducing Evelyn to another man, he haggled. Just get that lame Band-Aid away from me. Debbie stopped peeling the Band-Aid at once. What if you get infected while taking a shower? I can take care of myself. Sighing, Debbie put the first aid kit away and said, Let's go. Let Evelyn be. She had a busy day at work, and I'm sure she's tired. Carlos nodded and stood up from the sofa. You want to know what I think? He asked Evelyn. I think you need to play harder to get. String him on for a couple years if you want. If you get with him too quickly, it might make you look desperate. He turned to Debbie. Honey, why are you staring at me? I mean it. We need to let Sheffield know that Evelyn's not that easy. Otherwise, he won't think she's worth keeping. Debbie tried her hardest to drag the man out of the room as he prattled. Carlos didn't want to leave the room yet. I haven't hugged Gwen yet. Let the baby sleep now. You can see her tomorrow. Out. Debbie insisted. Okay. Carlos dropped the idea of hugging his granddaughter, but he was still angry with Sheffield. He continued, Look, Evelyn. See this bruise? That was Sheffield. Tell him if he tries anything like that again, I'll beat the shit out of him every time I see him. Carlos' voice trailed off when the door finally shut. Silence reigned in the bedroom once more. Evelyn felt her headache. She missed the calm, cold, decisive Carlos Huo. What happened to him? How did he manage to lose his cool? Sighing helplessly, she tucked her sleeping daughter in and kissed her forehead before heading to the bathroom for a shower. The next morning at ZL Group, Evelyn called Nadia in and said, Contact Theo Group and set up a meeting. I want to talk to Mr. Tang about his research projects. Actually, Evelyn didn't want to talk to him directly. so she asked Nadia to do it. Nadia nodded. Yes, Miss Huo. Right then and there, Nadia dialed the phone number of the assistant to the CEO of Theo Group. Hello, this is Nadia from ZL Group. My boss wants to meet with yours. When would be a good time to do that? 2 minutes later, Nadia hung up the phone. Miss Huo, they said. Mr. Tang is not in the office now. They'll call when he's back in. Inexplicably, Evelyn heaved a sigh of relief. Okay, thanks. Nadia nodded with a smile. By the way, the managers are supposed to be conducting a tour of the company. Sort of a checkup on how things are running, right? Have they started that yet? Evelyn shifted her attention back to work. They will start in 3 minutes, Miss Huo. E.T. Why don't you get to work instead of hiding in here? A domineering female voice suddenly rang behind them. The female employee's face turned even paler. I'm really done this time. She immediately greeted her supervisor respectfully. Hello, Miss Chi. The sound of high heels came closer and closer, and a woman stalked up to the pair. Slacking off? Lily Sue, do you want to lose your job? The indignant supervisor turned on Evelyn next. And who are you? Where's your uniform? It's you. The woman was taken aback the moment her gaze landed on Evelyn's face. They hadn't seen each other for 2 years, but they recognized each other at once. Jillian was stunned, while Evelyn was expressionless. You also work here? Jillian didn't think anyone who had nothing to do with the company would be here at this hour. Evelyn nodded indifferently. Which department are you in? Why aren't you wearing your uniform during working hours? And you're just chatting away with the coworker? Why aren't you at your desk? Jillian scolded Evelyn arrogantly as if haranguing a subordinate. Lily Sue quickly denied everything. No, I don't know her. We weren't talking. I had to use the restroom. I'm going back to work now. Lily Sue hadn't seen Evelyn before, so she tried her best to disassociate herself from her. Although Evelyn didn't start at the bottom, she understood how things worked here. She didn't want to get Lily Sue in trouble. First, I don't have a work uniform, and don't need to wear one. Second, we weren't in here talking. Please let her get back to work. Let Lily Sue get back to work? Who does she think she is? I'm the department supervisor. Jillian threw a scornful look at Evelyn. I don't care whether you wear a work uniform or not, because you don't work in the financial department. As the department supervisor, she was sure that she had never seen Evelyn in the financial department, nor had she ever seen the name Evelyn Tang. But we need to discuss this. You said you weren't talking in here? Got any proof? Evelyn cast her a cold glance and asked. So what are you going to do with Lily? Of course, I'll punish her according to the company's rules and regulations. She slacked off and was chatting during office hours, Jillian said in a justified tone. Evelyn didn't want to waste time in arguing with her. Do as you please. Strictly speaking, Lily was indeed making private phone calls during working hours. What Jillian wanted to do was reasonable, so Evelyn had nothing to say about it. Hey, which department are you in anyway? Jillian stopped the woman who had turned to leave. Jillian was a department supervisor, but why was Evelyn acting so arrogantly like she had a higher position in the company? None of your business. Evelyn's indifferent attitude pissed Jillian off. Lily had returned to her desk and the two of them were left alone. Looking at the woman who stood with her back to her, Jillian taunted. I think the reason why you won't wear your uniform is you want to show off your fancy dress. Am I right? But that's not your color. It's coffee. Girls in their 20s like me don't wear dresses like that. Brown is for old ladies. Evelyn stopped in her tracks and listened to her. And what's that old-fashioned lipstick shade? Don't tell me it's a luxury brand, huh? I have way better taste than you. Well, maybe it's because your temperament doesn't match the lipstick. It makes you look old and frumpy. This isn't a fashion show. You should change into your work uniform now. No wonder Lily had cried and complained to someone over the phone. Jillian was so sharp-tongued. She felt sorry for Lily and anyone else who had to work under her. Evelyn took out her phone and called Nadia. Nadia, I need you here. I'm in the bathroom of the financial department. Jillian was still unaware of the situation and Kant also saw the punishment notice posted on the company's website. The employee closest to Jillian had logged into the company intranet. Her punishment was posted plain as day on the department homepage. She clenched her fists and glared back at Evelyn. I'm going to talk to Mr. Huo, the CEO. I don't think he'll let you do this just to get back at me. A dash of sarcasm flashed through Evelyn's eyes. Should I call my dad and ask him to come here? Dad. Although Jillian had thought Evelyn was related to Carlos, she was still shocked by the fact that Carlos was actually Evelyn's father. No wonder this woman didn't need to wear uniforms. She could afford skincare products worth millions, and she could afford clothes and jewelry worth tens of millions. It made sense now. Tracy Wang immediately chimed in. Miss Huo, please don't be angry. She never saw you before. She didn't mean to offend you. I'll punish her if you want. Without another word, Evelyn turned and left the financial department. When they walked into the elevator, Nadia reported in a low voice. Miss Huo, the assistant of Theo Group's CEO called me back just now. He said Mr. Tang is super busy. He doesn't have time to see you. Besides, Mr. Tang has handed over all the work regarding the research and development to his team. If you have any problem, you can contact his team. Evelyn didn't respond. She was in a bad mood because of Jillian, and now Sheffield was making things hard for her too. She rubbed the spot between her eyebrows. I see. Evelyn had just gotten settled in her office when her phone rang. It was Carlos. What's going on with the supervisor of the finance department? Evelyn knew Carlos was just asking. There was nothing accusatory in his tone. Nothing serious. She got too big for her britches, she explained. That's my girl, he beamed. I raised you to be a fighter. If someone challenges you, you fight back. Don't worry about a thing. I'll be there for you if anything happens. Evelyn smiled. Yeah, I know. Thank you, Dad. I'm your dad. I'm always on your side. And I do trust you. Get back together with Sheffield if you want. But if he makes you unhappy, cut him loose. You're better than that, you know. He was used to wielding power. He could fire as many employees as he wanted, for example, the supervisor of the finance department. But Sheffield was another matter entirely. His daughter loved the guy, and that made all the difference. But if Sheffield hurt her again, he would step in and deal with him. He wasn't going to let that happen no matter what. I know, Dad. That afternoon, Nadia and Evelyn had a meeting. Carlos had gotten wind of how Jillian had gotten hired. The general manager who interviewed her was bribed. After her encounter with Evelyn, she had been punished. But Jillian was a hard worker. So instead of being fired, she just got busted down to team leader. And she'd have to pass the qualification test to stay employed there. The general manager who hired her was also involved, and he was demoted as well. Although this matter was not earth-shattering, it still caused a stir among the employees at ZL Group. It was because Evelyn was in the middle of it. And after she was demoted, Jillian was punished again by Carlos. He was looking out for his daughter. People started to gossip about Jillian, the woman who was foolish enough to offend the princess. It didn't matter whether she was in the right or not. The point was she had messed with the wrong person, and she would be the one who was wrong in the end. That night, Jillian went to the Tang residence. In the Tang residence, near dinner time, the old house was brightly lit. Several servants were. Finance department. Who cares about being a supervisor? Everyone heard what he said. They all knew he was being sarcastic, and the two sisters were embarrassed. Peterson sat down at the table with a long face. Leah didn't dare to say anything back to Sheffield. She could only complain to Peterson in a low voice. Listen to him. Peterson didn't say anything. Aware that Sheffield didn't want to listen to her complaint, Jillian continued. I'd like to stay on at ZL Group. Being a team leader is fine by me, and I'll just stay away from Evelyn Huo. Sheffield nodded. Yes, that's a good idea. You can't beat her. Again, Jillian felt humiliated. She had to change the subject. Aren't you staying for dinner? No, I'm not hungry. There's too much food and it's too rich. I get sick if I ate that. I prefer cold water and steamed buns. Well, goodbye everyone.
Bon appétit.
Sheffield was always blunt and defiant around the Tangs. And this was one of the reasons why his father, Peterson, had disowned him in the first place. Peterson, do something. There was a hint of grievance in Lee's voice. This time Peterson finally opened his mouth. He shouted at his arrogant son. Stop! Sheffield turned, a sour look on his face. Stay for dinner. No thanks. As an outsider, I'm not supposed to eat at the same table with your family. Peterson thumped the table in anger. Didn't you choose to come back? Why do you have to be so salty? Everyone fell silent, not daring to say a word. They didn't want to get between Sheffield and his father. Not when they were fighting like this. A look of disdain flashed in Sheffield's eyes when he spoke again. Now that you know I'm salty, maybe you'll find a private place where we can talk about work. I don't need all these losers around. I'll be willing to sleep with you, not to mention have dinner. The Tang family was like a spider's web. 100 strands, and each of these strands was a secret. And if you lingered too long, just like an overly curious fly, you'd be stuck fast. You little brat. Peterson's face turned red from fury. Get out, he roared. Happy to. Without any hesitation, Sheffield turned and stalked out the door. Then they heard the engine of his wine-red Maybach fading in the distance. They were still quiet 3 minutes after he had left the house. They just sat in the dining room, trying to shed the aura of awkwardness that clung to them. Peterson's eyes fell on Lee's face. He said coldly, "He's still a kid. Why were you so sassy about it? He didn't want to come back anyway. If you go on like this, he'll never want to come home." After listening to his words, Leah felt very aggrieved. She was Peterson's wife. According to her seniority, Sheffield should call her mom. Yet he never did. Instead, he verbally attacked her every chance he got. And every time, Peterson blamed it all on her. She wasn't happy about what Peterson was saying, but she had no choice but to accept it. Okay, I get it. Let's eat. Peterson calmed down a little bit because of her conciliatory tone. But soon he felt that what he said was unfair to Leah. So he comforted her. I'll talk to him after he calms down. He should be more respectful. Yeah. Passing him the chopsticks, she began to pick up food for him. Soon after the family started eating, a servant came downstairs with a child in her arms. Mr. and Mrs. Tang, the young master is awake. Mom! The second Nastas Tang woke up. He wanted his mother. Upon seeing Leah, he felt sad with tears in his eyes. Putting down her chopsticks, Leah came over to take him in her arms. In front of Theo Group's office building. Felix reminded the woman sitting in the back seat. Miss Huo, we have arrived. Okay. Evelyn put away the file. Felix unbuckled his seatbelt, got out of the car and opened the door for her. Then he helped the woman in high heels out of the car. With a box in her hand, Evelyn walked towards the entrance, bodyguard in tow. Go talk to the guard. I'll wait here, she told Felix. The only thing she wanted to do was see Sheffield without alarming anyone. Felix nodded and walked up to a security guard. Hello. Miss Huo of ZL Group is here to see Mr. Tang. Which Mr. Tang? The security guard asked. The younger Mr. Tang. Mr. Sheffield Tang. After Sheffield assumed his position as CEO, many people called him the younger Mr. Tang to distinguish him from his father, Peterson Tang. Before the security guard could speak, a man who was walking by stopped in his tracks. He cast a glance at Evelyn, who held a box with both hands, and asked with a smile, You're here to see Sheffield Tang? Evelyn looked at him from head to toe when she heard him mention Sheffield's name. The man dressed as a successful businessman. He wore a gray striped suit with a dark blue tie, briefcase in his hand. He had fair skin, single eyelids and a faint smile on his face. Evelyn was sure that she had never met this man before, so she didn't care about it and looked away. Felix nodded. We are. The man glanced at Evelyn and then turned his attention towards Felix again. Are you sure you're referring to the same Sheffield Tang? Felix exchanged silent glances with Evelyn and nodded. Yes, sir. Do you know Mr. Tang?
Doi.
Of course. He slept with his sister-in-law when he was around 15. Who wouldn't know him? Almost immediately, Evelyn raised her head to cast a reproachful glare at the man, fuming over his comment. Felix gestured at Evelyn with his eyes, telling her to calm down, and then asked the man, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. Please forgive my ignorance. I am the 5th child of the Tang family, Sterling Tang. Sheffield is my younger brother. When Sterling's eyes met with Evelyn's, a strange feeling began to grow in his gut. However, before Felix could say anything else, Evelyn's face darkened and she interjected. How could you say something like that? Aren't you supposed to be looking out for your own brother? Why would you even be throwing mud at him? What kind of a brother are you? The tone of her voice made Sterling's heart tremble. Although it wasn't the first time he had seen this lioness of a woman, this was the first time they had been in such close proximity to one another. Their lack of acquaintanceship, however, wasn't due to Sterling's lack of trying to keep in touch with her. Quite the contrary, whenever he tried to approach Evelyn in the past, he'd be met with a bevy of bodyguards who'd follow her around at all times. Sterling had never imagined that hidden underneath such a beautiful face was an imposing figure, no less than a queen. Evelyn was just standing there in a modest emerald green skirt suit, but her poise and physical grace were enough to render him breathless with excitement. If he had remembered it correctly, Evelyn was just 2 years younger than him. Although she was just in her early 30s, she had a fiery charm that most women of her age did not possess. Sterling couldn't help but feel enamored with Evelyn, captivated by her stunning good looks and strong character. If the past 10 years of doing business had taught him anything, it was that ZL Group was of paramount importance to Y City's economy. Keeping that in mind, Sterling feigned a smile and said, You're right. I am sorry to have upset you. However, I was just speaking the truth. RDS finding himself in a very difficult position. Evelyn knew what he was worried about and said, Tell me how to open the doors. I'll go inside myself. Evelyn found Sheffield's office doors a bit strange because they didn't have a lock. Tobias Shin explained, There's a secret recognition system on the doors. To open them, you'll need to show the right palm print or face. Come with me, Evelyn told Tobias Shin. She had no intentions of leaving without seeing the person she had come for. Evelyn stood there in front of the office doors, patiently waiting for Tobias Shin to open it. Feeling perplexed, the personal assistant wondered if he should do it or not. Having lost her patience, Evelyn snapped angrily. Call your boss now and tell him that if he doesn't open the doors, he will never see me again. Just as the words had left her mouth, the doors opened automatically before Tobias Shin could even make the call. What's all the noise outside? A lazy voice came from inside the room. Tobias, what happened? Mr. Tang, it's me. Evelyn entered Sheffield's office. When he saw her, Sheffield smiled and said, Oh, Miss Huo, it's you. Then he looked at his watch and said, Is there something important you'd like to talk to me about, Miss Huo? Sheffield's office was just as big as Carlos, and even though the decoration was simple, everything inside that room had tricks. Sheffield stood up and walked towards her. Suddenly, the office doors slammed shut, leaving only the two of them inside the large room. Sheffield stood close to her, close enough to cross the distance between them in a single step. Evelyn's anger was gone. She handed the box to him and said in a softer voice, I brought you the Western dessert you used to bring me. Sheffield took the box from her and looked at it. Thank you, Miss Huo. But have you ever seen a man who enjoys eating dessert? But you used to buy desserts all the time. He would also sit down with her and eat them sometimes. With a smile on his lips, he continued, That was then, this is now. Besides, I didn't like desserts back then either. I was thinking maybe you were too busy with work to eat. That's why I bought them for you. I never liked desserts. Didn't you know that, Miss Huo? Evelyn didn't know what to say. Since he often dropped by her office with desserts for her, she figured he liked them. She really didn't know him at all. I'm sorry, Miss Huo. He smiled as usual and returned the box to her. Evelyn lowered her eyes to look at the box in her hand. Bitterness filled her heart. So this was how it felt to be rejected. She controlled her emotions and said, "Can we talk? We're talking right now, aren't we?" He put his hands in his pockets. She shook her head. "Can we maybe do this over dinner? My treat." "Nah, I don't think so. I've been really busy since I took over Theo Group. If you have anything to say, Miss Huo, just come out and say it." Evelyn looked him in the eye. "I never married Calvert." "I know. So what?" Evelyn didn't respond. Thinking of a possibility, Sheffield said in a half-smile, "How quaint, Miss Huo. You think I still love you, don't you?" Evelyn had to admit that was exactly what she thought. And that was why she came to see him. Sheffield laughed out loud. Only he knew how much he was hurting when he did that. "Yes, I used to love you. I loved you more than life itself. I didn't want to live if I had to do it without you. But the past 2 years made me realize that I didn't need you in my life. Being single is good. I don't need to worry about how you're doing, and I don't have to think about how to make you happy. Nor do I have to rack my brains to please your family. Come to tea." Focus on their work. Carlos also joined in their activities. In addition, he decided to hand out awards to some outstanding employees. The excitement of getting an award fired up the workers. Each employee could bring someone to the team-building activity. Could be a family member or a friend. But children were not allowed because too many kids might disrupt things. There might be kids who were there to cause problems. And that was not what the night was all about. On the day when the programming department and the finance department held their activities, Carlos was away on business. He couldn't make it, but he wanted someone in a leadership role to be there, so he called Evelyn. He told her to attend the activities on his behalf. It was just a formality. Evelyn agreed. That afternoon she went to a spa. And then that evening she was headed for the building where the party was being held. When Jillian knew Evelyn would be there, she gnashed her teeth angrily. Evelyn was now the thorn in her side, stinging her. And yet she couldn't get rid of her. But then Jillian got a brilliant idea. She called Leah and rescinded her invitation to the dinner. Then she called Sheffield and said, "Sheffield, our company is holding a dinner tonight. And I heard that the CEO will also be here to give awards to the hard workers. My colleagues all have a +1. I invited my sister, but she can't make it. I'm embarrassed to be alone. Will you be my +1? Sheffield immediately picked up Jillian's hint when she said that the CEO would be attending the dinner. It didn't matter whether she had meant Carlos or Evelyn because he was intrigued nonetheless. Jillian, however, was only interested in using him to further her own agenda. "Sounds great. Do you know if Evelyn will be there too?" he asked bluntly, instead of turning her down. "I suppose so. By the way, Sheffield, have you two broken up already?"
No.
"Well, it's a little complicated. We had a fight some time ago and she's been mad at me ever since. We are just giving each other some space." Jillian was a little taken aback, blushing with embarrassment when she recalled complaining to Sheffield about Evelyn just 2 days ago. She had no idea that they were still together. "So, will you come?" "Of course I will. I don't want to miss the look on her face when she sees me there." Sheffield blatantly revealed his own motive without any inhibition. Jillian was at a complete loss for words. As it turned out, Sheffield was the one using her to further his personal goals, not the other way around. Nevertheless, since beggars couldn't also be choosers, Jillian was just happy to have Sheffield by her side. All she wanted to do was make Evelyn burn with envy. At the restaurant of the Hanging Garden, on the top floor of Silverstone Building. As the entire restaurant was reserved for ZL Group's private event, the place was swarming with Carlos employees. Sheffield's arrival attracted a lot of attention. Under the stifled admiration and gasps of the female employees, he walked straight to Jillian, which made her feel proud and elated. When someone asked Jillian whether she was dating Sheffield, she didn't deny it straight away. "Yeah, but in the past. We are just friends now." All the while, Sheffield sat next to her, fiddling with his cell phone with a smile on his face. He hardly uttered a word, nor was he interested in what Jillian was saying. After all, he wasn't here for Jillian. He was here for Evelyn. "Wow, Mr. Tang, you're a real gentleman. You're still friends with your ex-girlfriend after the breakup. Mr. Tang, you look much more handsome in person than you do on screen. Sheffield was showered with all kinds of praises. Once it was confirmed that they were not dating, many women made up excuses to rub elbows with Sheffield or flatter him during the meal. Sheffield, of course, knew how to play them like a fiddle. After all, he was well versed in the art of dealing wit. "I'll be a Lamborghini car." After her decisive announcement, the entire place erupted in an uproar once again. Wow! My goodness! Is that true? A Lamborghini? Unbelievable! Miss Huo is so generous. Did I hear that correctly? That's a car worth millions of dollars. Those of who were not qualified to participate in the selection seethed with jealousy. One of them cut in. Don't be so happy. So what if you get a Lamborghini? Can you afford the maintenance fee for such a luxurious car? Evelyn smiled at the young disbelieving employee and responded, "Don't worry. I'll also throw in a 3-year maintenance fee as an additional gift. Bear in mind that the grand prize is only awarded to the most outstanding employee. If the winner can't afford to pay for the maintenance of the car after 3 years, then I don't think that person deserved to win the prize in the first place." Evelyn's words made a lot of sense to everyone. Although the programmer who would get the grand prize couldn't afford the maintenance fees now, 3 years of time was enough for any outstanding employee to make a fortune. Evelyn managed to win the hearts of all the staff members of the programming department with her grace and display of generosity. The employees marveled at her ability to empower those who worked for the company, encouraging them to give their absolute best and nothing less. Unlike the other leaders, Evelyn didn't believe in subjecting her employees to long hours of lecture. Perhaps she didn't think herself worthy enough to do so. After all, she didn't have to start from the bottom. She got the job as the regional CEO only because she was the daughter of Carlos Huo. Sitting in his seat, Sheffield fixed his eyes on the female CEO, who shone like a goddess not far from him. He appreciated her skills. He didn't expect that Evelyn was so good at winning people's support. People in the programming department were quite excited, but the employees of the finance department were quite envious of them. Some of them were dissatisfied, saying that Evelyn was playing favorites. But someone who knew how hard the programmers worked said, "The programmers code day and night, their lives dedicated to their projects and the company. No one's saying we don't work hard, but they do it at the cost of their health." Those who were still unconvinced didn't dare say anything more for fear of being scolded by others. As everyone started to relax, a brave young man thought he was clever. "Miss Huo, are you single? I'd love to go out with you." "Ha ha ha. In your dreams." Another employee laughed out loud. "She is the eldest princess of our CEO. Don't even think about it. Go and earn tens of billions of dollars first, then you can ask again." "Tens of billions? You kidding me?" "Ha ha ha." That end of the restaurant was loud with laughter and chatter. Evelyn hadn't paid much attention to the people in the finance department. With a smile, she told everyone in the programming department, "I'm sorry. I already have a boyfriend, but I hope you guys find someone even hotter than me." "Wow, she has a boyfriend? Who is he, Miss Huo? He must be something special to be with you. Those other idiots never had a chance," someone joked. Evelyn asked Nadia to refill her glass with wine and apologized. "I'm sorry. It's not the right time yet. I'll tell you later. Thanks for asking, though. To a bright future." She raised her glass to propose a toast. They all knew that Evelyn couldn't stay long, so they all stood up with glasses of wine or juice in their hands. Under the starlight, the employees of the programming department raised their glasses and toasted the booming business of ZL Group. The employees greeted Evelyn warmly as she walked from one side of the restaurant to the other. That was where the finance department's table was. She nodded to everyone there with a smile. "Mr. Huo is on a business trip, so he couldn't be here." "I see." ELD had never had a drink together. She had an excuse tonight. Just as Evelyn and Nadia were walking toward Sheffield, he suddenly stood up with his phone to his ear and walked to a quiet place. She didn't know if he really needed to take the call in private, or whether he was avoiding her. Evelyn slowed down. While walking, she considered whether she should follow him. 3 seconds later, she made up her mind. She shadowed him as he tried to slip away from the party. She stood less than 2 meters away from him and listened to him while he talked on the phone. She guessed it was a woman on the other end because he was speaking in gentle tones. Yeah, we'll get together after I finish my work. On the other end of the line, Joshua, who had just picked up the phone, was confused. Why did you call me? I don't remember asking if you wanted to hang out. Honey, be good. I'll be home soon. Oh my God. What's wrong with you? Joshua got goosebumps all over his body. Don't be afraid. I'll keep you company. With his back to Evelyn, Sheffield stared at the night. He felt nauseated inside when he talked like this to the guy on the other end. Fuck. Listen, Sheffield. I'm Joshua Fan, not Evelyn Huo. If you want a girl, then go find Evelyn. Quit bugging me. I know. Don't be angry, honey. I'm headed home now, okay? Will you cut that out? Don't come over, bro. You're a pervert. I'm afraid to go to sleep now because you might rape me. Sober up and call me later. Joshua yelled. Rape him. Trying to suppress the urge to puke, Sheffield replied in a soft voice. Okay, bye. If he didn't hang up on Joshua now, he'd probably end up vomiting all over the place. Sheffield turned around and pretended that he just saw Evelyn. He said in a surprised tone, Miss Huo. Restraining from showing any emotion, Evelyn took 2 glasses of wine from Nadia and handed one to him. Mr. Tang, since you have come all the way here in person, I should propose a toast to you. Nadia left quietly, leaving the 2 of them alone. Looking at the wine glass in her hand, Sheffield said, I'm sorry, Miss Huo. I've not been in good health lately. I don't drink anymore. Is your health really bad or are you embarrassing me on purpose? She asked. Sheffield glanced at the employees who were peeking at them from a small distance. Fine. I won't embarrass you in front of the staff. He extended his hand to her for the glass. As Evelyn handed him the wine, she came closer to him than he had expected, and quickly grabbed the phone from his hand. She moved a few steps away from him while he was still confused. Sheffield gaped. The man was stunned, but then he smiled helplessly. People are looking and your behavior is very misleading. Ignoring him, she tried to unlock the phone. It had a password lock. Wait, Sheffield said in guilty haste. She cast a cold glance at him. Miss Huo, I hope you are aware that what you are doing is an invasion of my privacy. If you go through my private stuff, I will be forced to call my lawyer and hey. He watched as she unlocked his phone with ease. Only if there weren't so many people watching them, he could have easily grabbed the phone back from her. But he was helpless in their current situation. He had changed his phone, but his password was still the same as before. After Evelyn entered the old password, the phone was unlocked. She found his call records. The last person he had called was Joshua. So it was Joshua on the phone with him, not some woman. Giving the phone back to him, Evelyn sneered. Mr. Tang, it's fine if you don't like me anymore. But did you owe? We cannot deal with Carlos Huo directly, but we can make things difficult for his daughter. The 2 men flashed an evil smile. Madok Zhu said with a snort. We have to flatter Carlos all the time to gain his favor. Since he's on a business trip now, we can deal with his daughter. We can make things hard for her, and make her pay for what her father has done to us. You're right, but don't make it too obvious. Otherwise, we'll have hell to pay if Carlos finds out. After thinking it over for a while, Madok Zhu suggested. She is the host tonight, isn't she? Call the waiter. Let's order before she arrives. Yeah, the food here is very expensive. We should call our friends and ask them to have dinner with us too. That way, the dinner would cost her a fortune and we will be doing our friends a favor. Durancia took out his phone and started to call his friends. Madok Zhu suggested. We need to call those who are ZL Group's partners, or our plan will be exposed. Right. When Evelyn arrived at the private booth, there were more people waiting for her than she had expected. As she walked in, Durancia stared at her cheongsam-clad figure. His eyes almost popped out. Those who knew him for a long time knew how much he liked women in cheongsams. In the light-colored cheongsam, Evelyn looked more attractive than any women he had seen. Even those young models he had dated couldn't hold a candle to her. Maddox stole a glance at Duran and sure enough, he had his eyes fixed on Evelyn. Her beauty pulled even Maddox into a trance, let alone Duran, who loved a woman in a cheongsam. Evelyn shook hands with Maddox, who was closest to her, and then turned to Duran. She apologized. "I'm sorry, Mr. Xia. It was my fault yesterday. I'm here to apologize." "That's all right, Miss Hua. It's an honor to have been waiting for such a beauty like you. Please have a seat," Duran said with a pretended ease. Evelyn was led to the seat of honor. She listened quietly as Nadia introduced the others to her. "Miss Hua, this is our supplier, Mr. Li. And this is Mr. Zhang." The gathering was a bit unusual, considering that the contract was not settled yet. But Maddox and Duran seemed anxious enough for her to meet the suppliers. She nodded at the others in greeting. After downing a few glasses of liquor, Maddox said, "Miss Hua, we're waiting for another important guest. He'll be here soon. I suggest we wait to ask the server to bring the dishes until he gets here. I hope that's all right with you." Evelyn wasn't pleased. Who was important enough to keep her waiting? She said in a flat tone, "Please ask this person to make it quick. I have another appointment to get to in half an hour." "Oh, I'll ask his whereabouts right away." Evelyn cast a casual glance at the empty seat to her right. It was for their last guest. About 5 minutes later, the doors to the private room opened, and in came Tobias and the waiter. They held the doors open on either side for the man behind them. As Evelyn watched, Sheffield walked in, wearing a wine-red plaid suit. "Oh, Mr. Tang. You're here," Duran exclaimed. They all stood up to welcome him with the same enthusiasm with which they had welcomed Evelyn. "Hello, Duran. I was having dinner with Mr. Yin upstairs. I excused myself since you invited me here," Sheffield replied with a smile. He glanced around the room and he braved a glance at Sheffield only to find that he was also looking at her. The smile in his eyes didn't fade as he took in all of her beauty. She shook her head slightly with a small smile and stood up from her seat. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." However, she had only taken 2 steps when she heard Sheffield say behind her, "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom as well. Miss Hua, please wait. Let me accompany you." "Huh." Evelyn turned around and said as calmly as she could, "There's only one restroom in the booth. Would you like to go first, Mr. Tang?" "No, let's use the one outside. I need to talk to you." He held out his hand like a gentleman, gesturing her to step outside first. It didn't seem like he would take no for an answer, and Evelyn was curious to know what he wanted to talk about, so she walked out with him. The minute Sheffield closed the door behind him, the group began to gossip. "Does Mr. Tang have a thing for Evelyn Hua? Well, it makes sense that he likes her. She's beautiful and rich. I don't think any man in the world could resist her. I think they are acquainted." When Mr. Tang first walked in, his eyes immediately fell on Miss Hua. That's right. And if they didn't know each other already, why would Sheffield say that he needed to talk to her? "Why did you bring Sheffield along anyway? Now that he's here, I feel like we're invisible to Evelyn," Maddox complained to Duran. It would be a lie if Maddox said he didn't have the hots for Evelyn. Just like Mr. Li said, no man could resist a woman like Evelyn. Sighing in defeat, Duran said, "I was going to try and make friends with him. Who would have imagined he knew Evelyn? And those two were close enough to go to the bathroom together. Of course they know each other. They're both business bigwigs, and they'd at least see each other at business events." Theo Group hosted an anniversary event a few days ago, and Peterson Tang introduced Sheffield and Evelyn to each other. "Oh, I see." After leaving the private booth, Evelyn handed her purse to Nadia and walked to the bathroom with Sheffield. When they turned a corner, the man suddenly grabbed her wrist and pushed her against the wall. Sheffield's face was so close to hers, she could feel his breath on her own. Seeing this, Felix immediately rushed over. Sheffield cast a cold glance at him. With one arm propped against the wall, he trapped Evelyn in his arms, preventing Felix from getting to her. Sheffield gave the bodyguard a look, indicating he should go away. There was danger in his gaze. Tayson had told Felix about this guy, the special man in Evelyn's heart, and his name was Sheffield Tang. Tayson also reminded him not to get involved unless Evelyn specifically asked him to. Remembering this, Felix stepped back and kept his distance from the two. Evelyn looked at Sheffield and didn't say a word. But he wasn't about to return the favor. He put his right hand on her waist and squeezed. Since when did the CEO of ZL Group, Evelyn Huo, bow to others' wishes? There was more than a hint of anger. He was practically growling every word. Evelyn was confused. What are you talking about? Let me go. Stop pretending. Everyone who knows Duran knows that he likes women in a cheongsam. Do you think just because I'm a newbie I wouldn't know that? All of a sudden, he held her tighter, the tip of his nose against hers. Their breathing was entwined. The odor of the wine they drank wafted around their nostrils. A sharp pain shot T. Eastside wearing only a white shirt, his tie in hand. After a while, Tobias walked up to him with the bill in his hand. Mr. Tang, the bill is beyond our company's financial reimbursement limit. How much is it? Asked Sheffield casually. Tobias looked at it. $499,236, he recited. Sheffield held out his hand. Let me see that. Tobias gave him the bill and thought, Evelyn has definitely gotten even with Mr. Tang this time. So Duran and Maddock had screwed him over. The bill clearly showed the details. The liquor was limited edition by a liquor group, produced a few years ago. It cost more than $20,000 a bottle. They ordered 7 of them. The red tea was $1.888 a pot. The champagne was $5.600 a bottle and they bought 3 of those. The rest of the damage was for the meal. Some of the dishes were charged by the person. The cheapest dish, Alaska king crab, was $3.800 per person. The fish maw with abalone sauce $5.800 per person. Black caviar and red caviar $8.000 per person. There were 8 people at the table. They had ordered more than 4 kilograms of braised whelk meat. It cost over $4.000 per kilogram. Yet those dishes weren't even the most expensive ones. The most expensive one was the abalone sent from Japan by air that morning. A 2 abalone share was priced at $9.800. They had ordered 8. The crocodile paw with white truffles cost $99.000. Coupled with the packs of cigarettes, snacks, and service fees, the total came to almost $500.000. Sheffield casually put his tie on his shoulder and calmly took out a black card from his wallet. He handed the card to Tobias and said, "That's okay. I got this." And Evelyn got him good by making him responsible for the bill. But he owed her anyway for ruining her cheongsam. After settling up with the cashier, Tobias gave the card back to him. "Mr. Tang, don't let your father see the bill. He'll get upset." The most expensive meal Peterson had ever paid for was under $300,000. But Sheffield had broken that record just a few days after he became the CEO. Luckily, he had decided to pay for it himself. Otherwise, he might be called before the board of directors to account for the cost. Wow, the old man is stingy. He has been making money his whole life. He has more money than he could ever spend, but he still gets ticked at a small amount like this. What's money good for if he doesn't spend it? You can't take it with you. Tobias was dumbstruck by Sheffield's bluntness. But this newest CEO always spoke his mind. In the parking lot, Sheffield paused in front of the car for a couple seconds. Head back to the office. He decided that he had made a bad choice when he took over Theo Group. There was an endless river of documents to deal with every day. Evelyn went back to the manor wearing Sheffield's suit jacket. She didn't want to attract any unwanted attention, particularly from her mom. She changed her dress in her bedroom before she went to Debbie's room. Debbie had just gotten Gwen to sleep. Seeing her come in, Debbie put her hand on her lips, silently telling her to be quiet. Evelyn whispered, "She fell asleep so early today." Debbie smiled. "She is such a sweetie girl. I told her grandpa and mom were both very busy today, And I would tuck her in tonight. I think she got it. After taking a bath and drinking some milk, she fell asleep. Evelyn touched her daughter's head and said, I'll take a bath first and take her to my room later. Let her sleep here. Your dad's away on business. Let her sleep with me. You need your beauty sleep. Okay. After kissing Gwen on the cheek, Evelyn went back to her bedroom. 3 days later, Evelyn came to the offices of Theo Group again, and again to see Sheffield. She sent a message to him on the way. I'm coming to your office to see you. Then she added, with dinner. She was sure. UT of the car with Sheffield's suit jacket in her hand. Hey Evelyn. Sorry to keep you waiting. Traffic was a nightmare. He looked at her apologetically. No, it's cool. I just got here. Let's go. Evelyn turned to Felix and instructed. Grab the food container. Yes, Miss Huo. On their way to the entrance, Joshua cautiously asked. Sheffield has been really busy since he took over as CEO. In fact, he's been working hard for so long I think he's gone nuts. What do you think? Sheffield's crazy? Evelyn shook her head. No, I haven't seen that. Well, what do I know? Many employees of Theo Group knew that Joshua was Sheffield's best friend. So Joshua was able to come and go as he pleased. No security guard stopped her when Evelyn entered the building with him. Just as they were about to enter the elevator, Joshua suddenly looked at his cell phone and said, Oh, shit. Sorry, Evelyn. I gotta go. Tell Sheffield we'll hang out some other time. Without giving her a chance to speak, he jogged out of there. Evelyn was confused. She and Felix got in the elevator and rode up. When they reached the top floor, Tobias greeted her. Miss Huo, nice to see you again. Hello, Tobias. I'm here to see Sheffield. Glancing at the closed office doors, Tobias said, Please wait a moment. I'll let Mr. Tang know you're here. Okay. Just like last time, Evelyn stood there, waiting while the personal assistant made the call. This time she didn't have to wait long. As soon as Tobias told her Sheffield was ready to see her, the doors to his office opened. Evelyn turned around, took the food container from Felix, and entered Sheffield's office alone. Inside, Sheffield was holding a little boy in his arms. Seeing her come in, he walked towards her with the boy in his arms. Buddy, say hi to your sister, he cooed. You could use a little practice. One day, she's gonna be your sister-in-law. Evelyn stared at the two of them. Sister? Really? I'm 31, and old enough to be his mother. Who is this? She asked. The little boy looked at Sheffield, then at her and called, Sister. Evelyn put the food container aside and put Sheffield's suit jacket on the couch. Hello, she greeted the baby. She always had an aloof attitude, yet her eyes softened as she took the little boy's hand in hers. She looked into his eyes. They reminded her of Gwen, who had the same bright eyes. The baby boy was so cute that she couldn't help pinching his face gently. A smile played on Sheffield's lips when he saw this. This is my son, he told her. What? The smile on Evelyn's face faded immediately. Who is the mother? She asked. No clue, he shrugged. You don't know? She asked, her voice cold. Nope. After giving birth to him, she had him sent to me through someone. I took a paternity test. Turns out he is really mine. Trying hard to suppress the bitterness and the urge to punch him in the face, Evelyn looked at him with a stony face. You don't even know who you slept with? I slept with a lot of women after our breakup. It would be impossible to narrow down his mother. Such a shame, and now I'm stuck with him. Sheffield looked at the boy with feigned frustration. His words reminded Evelyn of what Sterling had said about the obscenity in Sheffield's private life. She stared at him in disbelief. What does this mean for Gwen? Is this kid her half-brother? Her heart bled. After a while, she regained her composure. I brought your suit jacket, and I asked my cook to make some dishes for you. Eat while they are still hot. I'm leaving. Evelyn waved her hand at the little boy with a small smile and turned to leave. Hey! Sheffield called after her. Evelyn paused but didn't look back. You know, when we were together is sister. She propped her hand against her head helplessly. That damn Sheffield. He's getting bolder by the day. How dare he trick me like this? Back in her office, Evelyn asked Nadia to get her a photo of Peterson's youngest son. When she saw the picture, she recognized the little boy. She gritted her teeth and felt like strangling Sheffield. Terilyn and Joshua had agreed to go shopping on Saturday. But just as she was about to leave the house, Debbie hurried towards her. "Terilyn, can you look after Gwen? I have something urgent to deal with." Saying so, Debbie handed Gwen to her and quickly walked away. Terilyn didn't even get a chance to say anything. Debbie drove away in her car. Terilyn withdrew her gaze from the distant car and stared at the little girl in her arms. Finally, she giggled and said, "All right. Since you are so cute, Auntie Terilyn will take you out to play." Holding Gwen in one arm, she called Joshua with the other. "Hey, do you remember the cute little girl whose photo you use as your profile picture? Her parents and grandparents are busy today, and I'm babysitting her. Do you mind if I bring her along?" "Not at all. Please bring her by all means." Joshua agreed without hesitation because he wanted to see the baby in person as well. "Good. I'm on my way." Terilyn brought along her bodyguard, Bennett, and the driver. Only after confirming that the baby was well disguised did she take Gwen out of the manor. Joshua and Terilyn already had a little third wheel on their date. Joshua figured, what's one more? Nothing amazing is going to happen tonight anyway. "Hello, Sheffield. I'm going to see my idol. Wanna come along?" "Your idol? Since when do you have an idol?" "Terilyn's bringing over the little girl in my WeChat profile photo. Come on, man. You gotta meet her." Having just been tortured by little Nastas the whole day, Sheffield felt his head spin. He was still nursing a headache from that little encounter. No way. Blowing me off just like that? The baby is part of the Huo family. You want to get in good with these guys, then you need to learn to like them. All of them. At least try to be civil. Joshua wasn't going to give up so easily. Piss off. You want to be a punching bag for a little kid? Be my guest. Not my style, sorry. Evelyn had to take his surname. Their kid wouldn't be a Huo, not technically anyway. Joshua insisted. You need a break. A little R&R will do you some good. Come on, meet the baby girl with me. We can hang out while we watch her. Leave me alone. I feel like crap. Fine. I just helped you out and you can't help me? See what happens next time you need help. Of course, Joshua had it all planned out. He would play with the little girl for a bit, then pawn her off on Sheffield and go on his date sans kids. Sheffield rolled his eyes and gave in reluctantly. Fine. Where? Joshua grinned. Nice. The north gate of Shining International Plaza. I'll be there, Sheffield said wearily. Sheffield thumped his pen on the desk. But when he thought of who got it for him, he picked it up, blew off the imaginary dust, put the cap back on and lowered it gently into the pen holder. At the north gate of Shining International Plaza, Joshua and Terilyn were there, but Sheffield hadn't arrived yet. She is even cuter than the photo. You need to take better pics, Terilyn, Joshua commented when he saw the baby girl. He brushed her hair affectionately. She was wearing a mask. Her big eyes blinked adorably. Then he asked curiously, Ingenieur. To Sheffield's bewilderment, Terilyn finally realized that she was too excited. She took a few deep breaths and said, Joshua and I have tried everything, but she's still crying. Can you give it a try? Me? Sheffield pointed at himself in surprise. Yes, you're handsome. Gwen likes handsome boys. Come on, give it a try. Without giving him a chance to refuse, Terilyn put Gwen in Sheffield's arms. Sheffield was forced to take the crying baby. Her eyes were filled with tears. Hey, what's up with the mask? To hide her from the press. Why do you ask? Terilyn asked. She's short of breath already from crying so much. The mask makes it more difficult for her to breathe. We gotta take it off. Sheffield eased the straps off gently, then took the mask off. The baby's face was covered with tears and snot. Terilyn took out a tissue to mop the little girl's face. Gwen continued to cry as she looked at Sheffield's face. With one arm holding the little tyke, Sheffield took the tissue from Terilyn to wipe her nose. Sweet little girl, don't cry. Uncle Sheffield is here with you. It's all right. Sheffield was never so patient. After wiping her tears and snot, Sheffield finally saw her little face clearly. He nodded and said, "Cute and pretty. She'll be a heartbreaker when she grows up." Hearing his voice, Gwen never moved her gaze away from Sheffield's face again. "Hey little girl, can you say your name?"
No?
"Come on, don't cry. I'll buy you something yummy." "Okay." In Sheffield's eyes, every expression on the little girl's face was so lovely and adorable, melting his heart. He liked the little tyke a lot. That in spite of himself. Gwen hiccuped. Although she didn't stop crying, at least she was quieter. A very different voice called out to them. "Hello. You there." Just then, 3 policemen on patrol came over and looked them up and down. "What's up?" Joshua had a bad feeling about this. Are they here responding to a human trafficking report? He wondered. Why is she crying? Are you guys related? The police looked at each of them carefully, looking for signs of malfeasance. Terilyn rolled her eyes and said, "Officer, do you need your eyes checked? This is Joshua Fan, Darius Fan's kid. You know, the former mayor." Then her hand on Sheffield's shoulder. "And this gentleman here is the current CEO of Theo Group. You seriously think we're human traffickers?" The 3 policemen looked at each other and then one of them said, "I think we need to check IDs just to be sure. May I have them, please?" Joshua cooperatively took out his ID card and explained, "The baby is related to my girlfriend. This girl took one look at me and started crying. Afraid of strangers, I guess." They looked. He was who they said he was. However, that was not enough to prove that he was the son of Darius Fan. Seeing the still suspicious look in the policeman's eyes, Terilyn also took out her ID card to drive the point home. "Here's my ID. My father is Carlos Huo. We own this place." She gestured to Shining International Plaza. She continued, "Don't believe me? I'll call the manager of the Alioth building and ask him to come here to confirm it." They were pretty close to the Alioth building, so she had to find the nearest manager. Gwen's cries had largely subsided, and she was just weeping and fussing now. She pressed her little face against Sheffield's chest and choked a little. Finally, the police believed them and left. After sending the police away, Terilyn looked at Sheffield in surprise. She really stopped crying. And why should she be surprised? I guess they're right, she thought. Fathers and daughters do have a special bond. Sheffield held G. Still nice to her. I care about her a lot. She only had one niece so far, so of course she treated Gwen very well. Just like what she did now. She created a chance for the baby to get along with her own father. Wasn't that a nice thing to do? Joshua looked at her and asked, "Okay, where are we headed now?" "To an optician. I have lost a contact lens. She lost it this morning. Let's go." In the shopping mall, Sheffield took Gwen to the floor with toys and games. When they passed by a large indoor amusement park, he took a look at the little one in his arms and pointed to the place full of children. "Do you want to play in there, Gwen?" The little girl just looked in the direction where he pointed. After a long while, she suddenly held his neck tightly and buried her face on his shoulder instead of looking at the amusement playground. Sheffield was stunned by her reaction, not knowing what she meant. Did she want to go or not? "How about I take you on the merry-go-round?" Gwen didn't respond either. Sheffield communicated with her patiently. "Check that out. All those kids are enjoying the rides with their parents. Let's ride one together. Okay?" Then he found that the little girl's head, which had been buried in his shoulder, slowly tilted towards the double-decker merry-go-round. She opened one of her eyes and stared at it. 3 minutes later, she finally cast a glance at Sheffield. Sheffield understood immediately. He smiled and hugged the girl tightly. "Come on. Let's go ride on the horse." At the ticket office of the carousel, when Sheffield was plunking down money, the cashier looked at his handsome face and said shyly, "Your daughter is so cute." Sheffield looked at Gwen and smiled. "She's not my daughter. I'm her uncle." The cashier was a little embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought she was your daughter. You look a lot alike." That'll be $80, please. Thank you. The cashier thought to herself. They aren't father and daughter? I'm sure I saw a family resemblance. Was I wrong? After paying, Sheffield walked to the merry-go-round with Gwyn in his arms. Which one do you want to ride, little one? A blue horse, a yellow ostrich, or Santa's sleigh? For a long time he got no response at all from Gwyn. Just when he was about to give up and just pick an animal himself, she reached out her little hand and pointed at a blue horse. Sheffield got on the little artificial horse with Gwyn and made sure she was belted in tight. They could hear the cheerful cries of children all around them. There were young couples without kids riding the carousel too. He resolved to take Evelyn here to ride the carousel one day. He was pretty sure she never came here as an adult. He was going to fix that. 3 minutes later, the merry-go-round started spinning. The song Fearless played over the speakers. Sheffield began humming the song to Gwyn. I'm not scared of cockroaches. Nothing can scare me. I'm not afraid of sleeping alone. I never lack courage. He held her little body with one arm and gently shook her hand with the other, letting her hand wave back and forth with the rhythm of the music. Gwyn stared at Sheffield, who was acting like a kid himself, allowing him to swing her hand back and forth. She didn't resist. And why should she? She was having fun. She couldn't quite put it in words, but she had thoughts to the effect of, this guy's so different. It's like he's a child himself, and I think he's enjoying this more than I am. When the merry-go-round stopped, Sheffield hopped down first. He had Gwyn clutch the pommel tightly, and then he unbuckled her and helped her down. He put her ched to you. Sheffield chuckled. What can I say? Kids like me. Take Nastas, for example. He always wants to play with me. He hardly ever bugs you guys. He was right. Every member of the Tang family knew that Nastas was very attached to Sheffield, but they didn't know why. Hearing that, Sterling decided to stow his thoughts for the moment. He put his arm around Kaylee Lou's shoulder and said, I'll let you go then. Nice seeing you again. Bye. So long. Without giving the couple a second look, Sheffield turned around and whispered to Gwyn. Don't be afraid, sweetie. They're gone. Your juice is ready, I think. He grabbed the cup from the counter, glancing at the number to be sure it was theirs. Before he let Gwyn take a drink, he called Joshua. Ask Terilyn how Gwyn's stomach is. She allergic to anything? Joshua asked Terilyn and then answered. She said no. She says Gwyn is perfectly healthy. That's good. Only then did he gently tell Gwyn, who had been holding the cup and waiting to drink, you can drink it now. Everything okay? Has Gwyn been good? If she gets to be too much, you can call us. Sheffield didn't want to curse in front of Gwyn, so he tried to hold his temper. Bruh. Don't try that with me. I know you better than your father does. You kept trying to get me to come over because you want me to take care of Gwyn. That way you can be alone with Terilyn. I'm not dumb. Joshua grinned. Dude, you know me too well. But get this. Mr. Huo is very strict when it comes to Terilyn. I barely see her. But this is my chance. Mr. Huo's off on a business trip, so I can spend some quality time with my girlfriend. Sure, Terilyn and I can take care of Gwyn. But what if I can't control myself around her and try something? It's not good if Gwyn gets exposed to that, right? Sheffield didn't want to waste any more time on Joshua. Cut the crap. I'll keep Gwyn then. Go on your date. She can sleep at my place tonight. I can pretend she's my daughter from now on. Gwyn was really thirsty. She took a big gulp of the juice before stopping to take a breath. We'll come and get her when you get tired. All right, I'll let you get back to taking care of Gwyn, Uncle Sheffield. Joshua joked. Sheffield snorted and hung up the phone. After drinking some juice, Gwyn held the cup and looked up at Sheffield. Sheffield put his phone in his pocket. He took the juice from Gwyn with one hand and held her in his other arm. Let's go, Gwyn. Ignore them. I'll take you to buy some toys. How about a pair of beautiful princess shoes too? 2 hours later, Terilyn was getting worried. She hadn't heard one word from Sheffield. Let's go find them. Gwyn is so cute, what if Sheffield wants to keep her? She told Joshua. Actually, She was simply afraid Sheffield would find out Gwyn was his biological daughter. This secret was huge. He had to be told properly, not find out by accident. No way. Tell you what, if he takes Gwyn away from you as his best friend, I'm willing to give myself to you in trade, Joshua declared. Terilyn rolled her eyes at him with a smile and pushed him. Hurry up. Looking after a toddler is no mean feat. Sheffield's been at it a long time. He must be tired. Let's go find them. Okay. The two of them found Sheffield and Gwyn at the resting area of the children's clothing floor. Gwyn slept soundly in Sheffield's arms, covered by Sheffield's suit jacket. Tons of shopping bags surrounded Sheffield's feet. Oh my God. You bought all this? What did you get? Joshua's eyes widened when he saw all those bags. There were at least 10 shopping BJT all this, okay? Okay. Why not? Joshua didn't understand. Terilyn avoided making eye contact with him. She had to come up with another lie. Because they don't want her around strangers. I mentioned you to her parents once, so you're not a stranger. To keep Gwyn's identity a secret, Terilyn felt she had told more lies in this short time than she had in her entire life. Makes sense, Joshua agreed, happy he wasn't a stranger to Gwyn. But he felt Terilyn was being a little weird. And yet he couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong. Evelyn staked out Sheffield's apartment for 2 days before she figured out he had been sleeping in his office. She booked 2 movie tickets online for that night and sent the link to Sheffield and said, "Let's have dinner and catch a movie tonight." After a long pause, he replied, "I already have a dinner appointment. Then let's go to the movie after that. I can switch out the tickets." The movie started at 8 p.m. "No, don't change it. I have something to deal with tonight. I can't make it." Reading the message, Evelyn was in a daze. After a long while, she replied, "I can wait for you at the theater." "Not necessary." Evelyn insisted. "It is." This time he didn't reply. Evelyn got to the theater by 10 p.m. Since it was so late, there was almost no one there. Only a few young people who were there to watch a horror movie were hanging out, waiting for their movie to start. Evelyn sat alone in her seat, staring blankly at the movie tickets in her hand. Felix sat in a seat 2 rows behind her, looking about warily. At 10:30, when the movie was about to begin, the ticket taker began checking the tickets. After looking around, Evelyn walked into the theater alone, disappointed. There were only a few people inside the theater. She found her seat easily and sat down. To her utter dismay, Sheffield didn't show up even after the movie began. She had no idea what was going on in the movie. Her mind was elsewhere, preoccupied with thoughts of him. She told herself that she needed to be as patient towards him as he was to her in the past. However, half an hour later, her patience waned and was gradually replaced by anger that surged up in her heart because he had stood her up. She closed her eyes and put her hand on her forehead to compose herself. She didn't notice the black figure entering the theater. Felix was sitting in the last row on the far left. The figure walked towards the right side of Felix and sat down in the farmost seat. Felix noticed the man, but since the theater was very dark and they were not sitting close to each other, he couldn't make out the person's face. And after the person sat down, there was no more movement from his side. He was just sitting there watching the movie. Felix did not pay any more attention to him. The movie came to an end, and Evelyn still couldn't see any trace of Sheffield. She sat still in her seat and looked up at the blank screen with a bitter smile. It seemed that he really didn't want to be with her again. She walked out of the cinema, followed by Felix. When they got to the car, Evelyn stood still. She didn't get in. "I want to take a walk," she told Felix. "Okay, Miss Huo." Felix asked the chauffeur to wait for them in the car, and he silently followed her. It was early summer. The weather was pleasant. Evelyn walked slowly along the midnight road. A few cars occasionally whizzed by her. A young couple was quarreling on the other side of the road. They hugged for a while, then separated and argued again. A few meters behind Evelyn, 2 men were whispering in their lowest voice. "You go, BC. Get lost." She was pissed. He was such a jerk. She didn't even want to talk to him at this point. Instead of dodging, he flirted. See? Admit it, you're so stubborn. Come here. He stepped forward and took her into his arms under her cold and angry gaze. Let me teach you how to be a woman, he purred, lowering his head and kissing her deeply on her red lips, which he had been missing for the past 2 years. Evelyn was caught off guard. After a few seconds, she broke herself free and slapped him across his face. Let alone Sheffield, even Evelyn was surprised by the slap. She didn't mean to. The silence between them was dreadful. The smile and the dandiacal look on Sheffield's face disappeared. His eyes were as calm as the sea. You are disgusting, Sheffield. How dare you kiss me with those lips that had just kissed another woman? It makes me sick. Rubbing his cheek, he replied. I never kissed them. But he deserved the slap. He had basically asked for it. Even if you didn't kiss them, you must have hugged them. Anyway, I don't care what you did with them. You really make me sick. Evelyn didn't know what was going on inside Sheffield's mind. He stood her up at the movie, then came all the way just to tell her that he had been in bed with another woman. She didn't know what to make of his behavior. Did he think that, in order to get back with him, she would ignore the fact that he was sleeping around with other women? She had had enough of this drama. I've never hugged any of them either, Sheffield continued to explain, rubbing his face. It was starting to turn red. Evelyn's slap didn't hurt him, but he was embarrassed. That was the first time he'd ever been slapped. Not everything is all about you. Evelyn walked towards Felix. Ask the driver to bring the car over here. Yes, Miss Huo, Felix replied obediently. Looking at her back, Sheffield shouted. Think you know everything? You don't. That boy you saw in my office is not my kid. I don't care. Evelyn answered without turning her head. I didn't sleep with anyone else. He couldn't hold on to his charade any longer. He was hoping she'd apologize. Now it seemed impossible. What do I care? We're not together. Evelyn yelled. So are you apologizing? You wish. She decided to leave this man alone. She was so mad at him. But I really miss you. Can you stay with me tonight? He really wanted to sleep with her. Abruptly, Evelyn turned around and glared at him. Don't ever say that to me again. Date who you want. I don't care. Sheffield tried to say something, but a glare from her shut him down. Not another word. You hear me? Evelyn snapped. Instead of stopping his prattling, Sheffield strode over to her and took her into his arms. A chance meeting. What could be better? It's late. Sure you don't want to come home with me? Let go. Hey, don't forget, it was you who came to me and asked to get back together. Can't you just say something soft and nice? Shove off, loser. She thought that was what she wanted, but not if he was going to act this way. Starting over would probably be impossible. Look, it's over, okay? You live your life and I'll live mine. It was not that bad to be a single mom. Oh, come on. You went to D-City to see me. I think there's a future for us if you just give it a chance. Not giving her the chance to retort, he started dragging her along with him. Felix. To prove that she wasn't joking, Evelyn called her bodyguard over. A few seconds later, Felix appeared in front of them. Yes, Miss Huo. Get Sheffield MFF. Covering her mouth with his hand, Sheffield looked at Felix and chuckled. Eve. Here today, right? Who asked us to come? Tell me. Sheffield smiled obsequiously and said, Okay, my bad. It was all me. Sorry about that. That's better. But seriously, what's your plan? You've been back for a while now. Why didn't you go to talk to Evelyn and tell her how you feel? Joshua wondered. Sheffield swung his club and said, I don't want to talk to her, I want an apology. And to see her naked. Why not both? The 2 other men beside him were amazed at how openly he talked about stuff like that. You horn dog, Gifford commented disdainfully. Joshua sighed and shook his head. I'm impressed that Sheffield always says what he thinks.
No filter.
Sheffield was never ashamed to speak about how horny he was. He didn't mind his friend's comments. After hitting the last ball into the hole, he passed the club to Gifford. Joshua put his arm on Sheffield's shoulder and said, Evelyn already offered to get back together with you, but you keep turning her down. Isn't that the same as being near the goal on the football field but never shooting? Sheffield stared at him before replying, I just want to linger in the doorway for a little longer. I'm the one in the game. I'm not even anxious. What? You think my life's a spectator sport, for you to comment on it? You're not even on the playing field, Joshua argued. Gifford burst into laughter. Hey, are you two still talking about sports? Why do I feel like you're talking about sex? Sheffield stared at him. Talking about sex? No way. You're hearing things. Gifford shook his head. That's right. Join in. You'll get the hang of it soon enough, Sheffield quipped. Gifford used the club to tap Sheffield's shoulder and said, Kind offer, but no thanks. It looks like the two of you are hung up on Carlos' daughters. I'm not. I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have anyone I really like yet anyway. Maybe the one for me hasn't been born yet. You should visit the OBGYN department when you get the chance. You might find her there, Sheffield joked, pushing Joshua away to grab the water. Dude, that's just gross. Tasteless even for you, and that's a pretty low bar. Gifford was not into little girls. Hey, check her out. Maestro Tang. Isn't that your girlfriend? Joshua looked in the direction of a golf cart driving up. Sheffield stopped to look at the approaching cart. One of the women sitting in it was Evelyn. He put down the bottle and immediately picked up a club. Say hi to her, guys. Out of my way, gents. The guys looked at each other, puzzled. Looking at Sheffield's exaggerated moves, Joshua suddenly realized what he was doing. He explained to Gifford, who was still confused. He wants us to get Evelyn's attention so that she can see how awesome he is on the golf course. Sheffield turned around and gave him a thumbs up. Gifford finally understood. Damn. You're just full of tricks, bitch Tang. Sheffield cursed without turning his head. Fuck off. You're a bitch. Hurry up. If she drives off, I'll be too late. Then they would have waited around for nothing. Sitting in the golf cart, Evelyn wore pink and white sportswear, white sneakers and a pinkish-white baseball cap. She smiled and chatted with her client who sat next to her. I almost never play golf, but sometimes I go golfing with Dad. You'll probably destroy me out there. The female general manager, Ms. Wu, modestly waved her hand and said, I almost never golf either. Don't worry. You could probably beat me on a good day. Evelyn. Someone called her name. When Evelyn turned towards the so, looked at them in puzzlement. What are you whispering about? Before Sheffield could say anything, Joshua told him. Oh, Sheffield was so touched that we helped him win his wife back. He said he'd do anything we want. One favor for you and one for me. Sheffield tried to stop him, but Joshua was too quick. Of course, Gifford realized what was going on. He acted as if he didn't know anything and played along. Placing one arm on Sheffield's shoulder, with a mock expression of gratitude on his face, he said, Dude, we're friends. That's what friends do. And thanks in advance for that favor. I have to think about what I want. Joshua is. Sheffield wanted to explain. Gifford wouldn't give him the chance. I get it. Tell me what you want us to do. Sheffield felt helpless. He had only promised Joshua one thing. Not one each. Joshua played me. Forget it. I have a girlfriend to get back. Sheffield angled his head towards Ms. Wu, who had already picked up a club. You and Joshua, go keep her busy. Gifford smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry. We'll take care of it. With big smiles on their faces, the two walked up to Ms. Wu. Joshua asked, Ms. Wu, do you like playing golf? Evelyn explained. She seems to be enjoying herself. Well, that's good. It would be our honor if you would play golf with us. He winked at Gifford, and the two of them stood on either side of Ms. Wu. Birds of a feather flock together. That saying might be trite, but it was true when it came to Sheffield, Joshua and Gifford. They were all handsome and well-mannered. Looking at Joshua's and Gifford's pretty faces alone was enough to make Ms. Wu's day. Before long, they were chatting with each other and laughing. Left alone, Evelyn turned her head to look at Sheffield, and happened to catch his eye. He was looking at her. He looked away and pretended to be practicing his swing. With a smile, she walked over and stopped a few paces from him. You seem to be good at this. Can you teach me? Sheffield deliberately looked around and asked Evelyn. Sorry, were you talking to me? Evelyn rolled her eyes and answered, Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Hua. I'm not that good. Maybe you can hire a professional coach. He practiced a few slices before he finally hit the ball. The ball rolled down the lawn and into the hole. Evelyn clapped her hands. Look at you. I think you're good enough. Teach me. His beloved woman was applauding for him? Despite his efforts to display false modesty, a smug look crept across Sheffield's features. He motioned her over and said, Okay, since your standards for a coach are so low, I'll teach you. He looked in his bag and selected a ladies' club for her to use. Evelyn, who was standing where he had been a moment ago, took the club from him. Sheffield said something to the caddies, and they all gathered around Ms. Wu, leaving the two alone. Sheffield taught Evelyn how to hold the club as he said, You put your left hand here and hold the club like this. And put your right hand here. No, that's not right. Like this. He walked over to her and put his arms around her from behind in one elegant maneuver. His hands covered hers. They held the club together. Unsure whether or not he did this on purpose, she felt his hands on hers, and his breathing was hot in her ear. His voice was as tender and masculine as she remembered. She blushed. Sheffield was still talking, his face so close to hers. You don't come here a lot, do you?
No.
Ding. He wants to get back together with you more than anything. But he wants you to make the first move. Evelyn couldn't believe her ears. I did. I asked him, but he turned me down. She had talked with Sheffield about starting over. What? That moron. Joshua was exasperated at the guy. Seeing how angry he was, Evelyn couldn't help but burst into laughter. I get it. He just wants to make things hard for me. Not really. Joshua wanted to put in a good word for his best friend. Evelyn shook her head. I know what he's up to. Don't make excuses for him. Can you do me a favor? I think so. What do you need? A few minutes later, Joshua walked back to the course. He ran anxiously up to Sheffield and said breathlessly, Sheffield, Sheffield. Sheffield looked back and asked impatiently, What? Why isn't Evelyn back yet? He wondered. You'll never guess what I just saw. Sheffield played through while waiting for Evelyn to come back from the bathroom. Spit it out. I saw Evelyn taking pills, Joshua whispered to him. Taking pills. Stunned, Sheffield put down the club. What kind of pills?
Flu, Zometing, Xamine.
Oh right. Fluvoxamine. You're a doctor. What's that medicine for? If Sheffield looked at Joshua's phone screen, he would know that he had just Googled antidepressants. The first medication to come up was fluvoxamine. Fluvoxamine? As a doctor, of course, Sheffield knew exactly what it was for. He furrowed his eyebrows. When he had first met Evelyn in D-City, she told him that she had a mild case of depression. That was why she went on a trip. Back then, she had been sad, restless, and often in low spirits. He was like the best antidepressant. When they got together, those symptoms vanished. He thought she had recovered, but why was she taking those meds then? Where is she? Sheffield asked. Why? What are you planning? Joshua wondered. What do you think? Fix my mess, of course. Thinking of what he had done to her a few days ago, Sheffield wanted to slap himself. I want to make my girl happy. Just then a golf cart came rolling up. Evelyn got out of the cart. With his eyes fixed on her, Sheffield asked, Where have you been? Evelyn cast a casual glance at him and answered, In the restroom. It takes girls longer than guys. What else did you do? Evelyn looked at him and asked, Okay. Weird question. What do you mean? Did you take any pills? Not like it's any of your business, but no, she answered honestly. However, Sheffield believed she was lying. Evelyn, are you happy? The look on his face was so serious Evelyn wanted to laugh. But sensing his concern, she couldn't. Not really. He not only lied to her but also played tricks on her. This was one long con. No one would be happy about it. Sheffield felt a sharp pain in his heart. She was clinically depressed again. The guilt in his chest was devouring him. He took her hand and asked, "Baby, why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" Evelyn was having a hard time holding her laughter in. This was just so hilarious. Amused by what was happening in front of him, Joshua had to walk away. He had clapped a hand to his mouth, but his guffaws could be heard through his fingers. "Tell me you." "Never mind. I know you're not much for golf. Let's go shopping, traveling, dancing, singing, whatever you want to do." The thought of her being depressed moved Sheffield to the verge of tears. He was such a jerk. Evelyn had been so depressed that she was on meds again, but he was still angry with her and kept making things difficult for her. Rose announced. Twirling the pen Evelyn had bought him, Sheffield continued. "I just wanted you to know I love Evelyn. I'll marry her whether you like it or not." Carlos had warned him not to talk about love, but Sheffield ignored it and did the opposite. "As far as I know, Sterling and the board of directors all want control of Theo Group. If you aren't careful, they'll boot you out. You also resign from the hospital. That means if you get fired as CEO, you won't have two nickels to rub together." "How can you afford to support my daughter?" Carlos asked. Moreover, he had a granddaughter now. Whether it was his daughter or his granddaughter, he would not let them go through life poor. With or without Sheffield. Sheffield replied without a trace of shame. "I'll just live at the Huo family manor with you guys. You're rich, Mr. Huo. Even if there were 10 of me, I still couldn't spend all your money. Besides, you don't even care about money that much. Plus, it's convenient for me to take care of Evelyn if I live there." Carlos felt blood rush to his face. "You won't get a penny of my money. Uncle Carlos, my dear future father, I won't ask for much. I'll quit drinking and smoking. I can also stop buying brand-name clothing. Just give me some money for groceries every month. That'll be fine." "Beat it. I'm not your father. I don't have a son whose last name is Tang." Carlos was getting a headache from talking to this man. How was he supposed to deal with this audacious young man? "Then you can call me Sheffield Huo from now on. You know I'm a great guy. If I become a member of the Huo family, then I'll make you guys proud," Sheffield said confidently. "Fuck off," Carlos thundered. "Keep talking like that and I'll set Evelyn up on more blind dates." With a serious look, Sheffield said, "Uncle Carlos, Evelyn is suffering from depression again. She's taking antidepressants. Are you sure you still want to butt in? Do you really love your daughter?" "Depression? Evelyn's taking antidepressants? Bullshit. I think you're the one who needs meds. My daughter is a happy girl. What nonsense are you spouting? Am I too kind to you? You want me to buy out Theo Group and close it? If ZL Group went up against Theo Group now, both Sheffield and his company would suffer a loss." "Uncle, I didn't lie to you. She took fluvoxamine, a kind of drug for treating depression. I promise I'll be good to Evelyn. I'll listen to you as long as you agree to give Evelyn to me." Sheffield sounded so serious, and he had even mentioned the name of the medicine. Carlos' heart sank. "Did you see Evelyn take the pills yourself?" he asked worriedly. Sheffield didn't see it with his own eyes. Joshua told him about it.
No.
Joshua saw it and ran off to tell me. "Did he tell you he saw it with his own eyes?" "Well, yes." Carlos' line of questioning gave him a bad feeling. There was no longer a tense war between them. Carlos calmed down and said, "If what you said is true, I'll let you start dating again. But Sheffield, if Evelyn isn't taking any antidepressants, and you're just messing with me, I will punish you." Before Sheffield could say anything else, the old man hung up the phone. The bad feeling grew stronger in his heart. Just to make sure, he rapidly dialed Joshua's number. As soon as the phone was connected, he asked, "Joshua, did you lie to me about anything?" It took a while for Joshua to respond to his question. "No, I didn't. Why would I do that? What did the pills Evelyn swallowed look like?" "What?" Joshua finally realized what was happening. "Oh, I forgot. Humph. You're just pretending. Evelyn already told me you. He also had asked an assistant to pack some night snacks from the Audiobook building. This time, Evelyn didn't go upstairs after she arrived at the entrance of Theo Group. On her orders, Felix told a security guard, "These are from Miss Huo. Please help us give them to Mr. Tang." "Thank you." Knowing that Evelyn was a special guest, the security guard grabbed the bag and said, "Okay." As he was about to enter the building, a woman came out. It was Jillian. She recognized Felix at first sight. She looked around and saw Evelyn standing not far away and looking at the security guard. "Wait." Jillian stopped the security guard. "Hello, Miss Chi." The security guard greeted. He certainly knew who Jillian was. She was the younger sister of the former CEO's current wife. "Where are you going?" Now that they were not at ZL Group, Jillian completely ignored Evelyn. "Oh, here's the thing. The eldest princess of the ZL Group asked me to bring something to Mr. Sheffield Tang. I have to go." "The eldest princess?" Jillian sneered, feeling annoyed. "This is the 21st century. She calls herself a princess? Evelyn Huo, you're such a bitch," she thought. She then said in a voice that could be heard by everyone present there, "I just left Sheffield's office. He's hard at work. Give the bag to me and I'll make sure he gets it." "Nah, I can't ask you to do that." "I'm fine with it, Miss Chi." The security guard took a look at Evelyn. Jillian feigned anger and rebuked the security guard. "Mind your manners. Why can't I help Miss Huo with it? It's not a minor issue. Miss Huo, we're very sorry. I'll ask my brother-in-law in Sheffield to teach these security guards some due lessons." Evelyn didn't move from her place. "It doesn't matter, Miss Chi, thank you. You've been very kind as to do me this favor." "You're welcome, Miss Huo. I can come and go to Sheffield's office at my will." "So, is this some kind of late-night snacks for him?" Jillian glanced at the takeout boxes with the logo of the restaurant on the 5th floor of Audiobook building. "Yes," Evelyn said frankly. Jillian's smile deepened. "Oh good." She took the takeout boxes, along with the gift bag, from the security guard's hands. "I'll give them to him. I'm heading to his office now." "Thank you," Evelyn said and walked to her car. She didn't get in until Jillian disappeared into the company. "Miss Huo, why didn't you go upstairs to meet Mr. Tang?" Felix asked, confused by her decision. He had seen them hugging earlier that day. Didn't they restore their relationship? Evelyn smiled resignedly. "I made him angry again." If she was stopped at the gate of Theo Group or at the door to Sheffield's office again, it would be embarrassing. She might as well not go up at all. Felix saw the helpless look on her face, yet there was a happy smile tugging at the corners of her lips. He refrained from asking any more questions and got into the driver's seat. In the CEO's office of Theo Group, when Jillian arrived at the assistant's office, she did not see Tobias in there. Some other assistant was on duty. The assistant stood up as soon as he saw her and greeted. "Hello, Miss Chi." "Hello. I'm here to see Sheffield." "Please wait for a moment, Miss Chi. I'll let Mr. Tang know." "Okay." She had come to find Sterling's assistant earlier, but had decided not to go to Sheffield's office at the time. She knew that he wouldn't allow her in without a good reason. When Sheffield heard from his assistant that Jillian was outside his office, he refused without hesitation. "Tell her I'm busy." The assistant reported back to her calmly. "Sorry, Miss Chi, Mr. Tang is busy right now and he does not want any guests." "Me where else?" Evelyn texted. "Why? Is it because it's too crowded at night?" Jillian texted back quickly. "Because it's not open to public." After sending the message, Evelyn put her phone back in her pocket. Jillian clenched her teeth angrily looking at the last message. She is showing off. She did this on purpose. Humph. Who cares? I can just get him some food from another good restaurant. Does she think that's the best restaurant in the city? She thought angrily. The door to Carlos' room was open. As Evelyn came closer to the room, she could hear her mother's voice come from inside. "Gwen, look at me. I am going to change into a huge dinosaur and eat your grandpa. What do you think? Isn't that a great idea?" Expressionlessly, Gwen stared at her grandma playing with the dinosaur toy placed over her head. When the little girl spotted Evelyn standing at the doorway, she was stunned for a few seconds and then slowly walked towards her mother, holding another little dinosaur in her arm. My baby. Dat. Mom. Evelyn put her bag on the desk and scooped up her little daughter. You are back. Are you hungry? Shall I ask the cook to make something for you? Carlos asked with concern. Debbie put the toy aside and just smiled at her daughter. I'm not hungry, Dad. Did Gwen behave? Mom, who bought this dinosaur for her? Evelyn didn't remember buying this toy for Gwen. Terilyn said it was from Joshua. Debbie explained. Joshua? Evelyn asked with a frown. He met Gwen. Yes. I was busy the other day, so I asked Terilyn to take care of Gwen. She and Joshua took her out to have some fun. Joshua bought her the dinosaurs. Terilyn told him that Gwen was her cousin's child. Debbie felt bad that Terilyn had to lie about Gwen's identity. Oh. Evelyn was a little relieved. At that very moment, Gwen looked at the dinosaur in her hand and muttered, Nuncle. The three adults in the room were stunned at once and stared at each other in complete silence. But they had no idea whom Gwen was calling. Evelyn was surprised that her daughter spoke. Gwen, did you just say uncle? Say it again, baby. Usually Gwen hardly spoke. The few words she did speak included mom, grandpa, grandma, and a few other simple words. Evelyn had forgotten how long it had been since Gwen had last spoken, and she was now saying a new word. The three of them were pleasantly surprised to hear her voice. Gwen stared at Evelyn for a while, and then with her encouragement she said again, Nuncle. Although she didn't know whom her daughter was referring to, Evelyn was glad to hear it. Sweetie, well done. Mommy will teach you new words. Next one will be auntie. Gwen didn't respond this time. That evening, as soon as Terilyn arrived, Debbie dragged her into her bedroom and asked, Did you teach Gwen to say uncle the other day when you took her out? What? Why are you asking? Terilyn was confused. Gwen suddenly said the word tonight. Twice. I wanted to know if you had taught her that, Debbie said. Terilyn was surprised and happy to hear the new information. She did. Yes. Wow. Meeting her father has really helped her. Gwen is willing to talk now, Terilyn thought. I'll take her with me again next time to hang out with Joshua. She couldn't tell anyone that she was actually taking Gwen to see her father. Debbie furrowed her brows, thinking. She turned to Carlos, who was reading something on his iPad, and asked, Carlos, is it possible that Gwen doesn't talk often because we never take her out much? Carlos didn't object. After a short pause, he said, If hanging out with other people is good for her, then let's take our father's mind. I hope he doesn't go to such an extent this time. Later that day, Evelyn met Sheffield again in a 5-star restaurant. They weren't in the same private booth but bumped into each other in the lobby. She was sure that he had also seen her. But they didn't exchange greetings because they were a bit far away from each other. In the middle of the dinner, Evelyn came out of the booth and ran into an acquaintance in the hallway. Hi, Mr. Chi. She greeted him in a cold voice. Roscoe Chi was standing there with more than 10 other young men. It seemed that they had just had a get-together. When he saw her, Roscoe Chi's reaction turned hideous and he remarked in a hostile tone, Oh, it's you, Miss Hua. What a surprise seeing you here. His friends saw her too and leered at her. Holy cow. Who is this beauty? Roscoe, introduce us. Roscoe, who is this chick? She is really hot. Roscoe, don't you have a girlfriend already? They exclaimed loudly. Evelyn ignored the crowd. She didn't look at Roscoe Chi again either, and waited for them to walk out of the restaurant. But some of them had no intention of leaving her alone. Roscoe Chi didn't want to introduce Evelyn to his friends, but since there were so many people egging him on, he had to put it simply. This is Evelyn Hua, the eldest daughter of the CEO of ZL Group. Roscoe Chi felt bitter as he spoke her name. His brother was one of Evelyn's ex-boyfriends. What? So she's Evelyn Hua. Then we're out of here. I'm not going to piss her off. That's Carlos Huo's daughter? No wonder she looks so sure of herself. Let's avoid her. This is above my pay grade. Let's jet.
Smo, Roscoe.
Get a move on. Roscoe cast a sidelong glance at Evelyn and whispered, Yeah, she's Carlos Huo's daughter. So what? She's bad luck for boyfriends, most of them have died. Who's going to date a girl like that? Seriously? Was she your brother's? The man wasn't bold enough to finish his sentence. A brief, weird silence followed. Roscoe's brother had been dead for several years. Many of Roscoe's friends knew how he died. Yeah, she's the woman who jinxed my brother and got him killed. Even after so many years, Roscoe still held a grudge against Evelyn. His voice thick with hate. If it weren't for this woman, his brother would still be alive. Roscoe's friends all chose to remain silent. They didn't dare to anger either Roscoe or Evelyn, so they made their way to the doors of the restaurant. They intended to leave. Roscoe held too much bad blood towards Evelyn. Arguing with him wouldn't make things any better, so she turned and went back to the booth. She didn't see what happened next. Just as Roscoe turned around, two men stepped in his way, blocking the hallway. One of the two men wore a silver-gray suit, and the other was in a suit of dark blue. Obviously, they knew who Roscoe was, and wanted to make sure he didn't go anywhere. Mr. Fan. What a surprise. What can I do for you? Roscoe tilted his head toward the man in the gray suit. And who's he? Roscoe asked impatiently. Not all of Roscoe's friends had made it out of the restaurant. The closest one ran up to him and whispered, That's the new CEO of Theo Group, the younger Mr. Tang. Roscoe didn't know Sheffield, but he knew Theo Group had a new CEO. He couldn't avoid knowing. It was all over the news. Knowing how powerful Theo Group was, Roscoe decided to show the new CEO a little respect. So he started over and greeted Joshua and Sheffield politely. Mr. Tang, Mr. Fan. Then he bowed his head to each of them in greeting. They weren't friends, so Roscoe's tone was cold and formal. Toothpick in his mouth, Sheffield asked Roscoe, Who were you talking to? Drugged one night by her ex-boyfriend. A mysterious man took advantage of her in an ecstatic night filled with sex. To take her revenge, she married the man and used him. As long as I'm alive, I'm still his legal wife, while all of you are just his mistresses. She remained adamant even when he was involved in scandals with other women. Eventually she stormed off after she learned that he had betrayed her again. But life brought her back to him a few years later, to his astonishment. Brother would pull out all the stops to be with her. A witch? Bruh. Looks like you don't know how to respect women. Let me teach you. Sheffield grabbed him by the hair and punched him again. Sheffield. It was Evelyn's voice. Sheffield turned to face her. She was walking towards him rapidly, looking anxious. She grabbed Sheffield's hand to stop him. Let go of him. Just a minute. I don't think he's learned his lesson, and I'm the one to teach him. He reached out his left hand and pulled her into his arms. Evelyn glanced at Joshua and urged, Do something. Finally, Joshua came over with Felix, and the both of them dragged Sheffield away. Looking at the bruises on Roscoe's face, Evelyn ordered Felix, Get someone to take Mr. Chi to the hospital. I'll cover the bill. Yes, Miss Hua. Felix began to make a phone call. Sheffield was still clutching Roscoe, refusing to let go. Not yet. He has to promise me something. Evelyn clasped Sheffield's hand and said patiently, Stop it, Sheffield. This isn't cool with me. Gasping for air, Roscoe leaned against the wall and said, So you're Sheffield Tang, huh? You'll pay for this. Really? Maybe I'd better kill you now. Sheffield dashed towards him again. Evelyn wrapped her arms around his waist and said, Damn it, don't you listen to me anymore? At that time, two bodyguards came over. One bodyguard took one arm, the other guy put Roscoe's arm over his shoulders and asked, Mr. Chi. Roscoe nodded. We'll get you to the hospital.